President Gonzalez, you are streaming.
Thank you, and good evening, and welcome to the Board of Education meeting for April 16th, 2025. I call this meeting to order. I also would like to remind everyone speaking tonight that we do use the closed captioning function on YouTube, so please speak as slowly and clearly as possible. With that, we'll move to the Pledge of Allegiance in English and Spanish, so I ask you to stand if able and join us in the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Juro fidelidad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. Thank you. Next up is our acknowledgement of tribal lands. We gratefully acknowledge the Native peoples on whose homelands we gather, as well as the diverse and vibrant Native communities who make their home here today. We'll now move on to a moment of silence for those who have given their lives in service to their country. All right, we'll move to roll call. Dr. Albright, can we have a roll call, please?
Dominguez.
Here.
Jackson.
Here.
Heather Benavides.
Here.
Alda Morito.
Here.
Crystal Tapia Romero. Danella Storga. Danielle Gonzalez.
Here. Our first item on the agenda is to consider adoption of the April 16th, 2025 Board of Education meeting agenda. And as a reminder, per our APS Board of Education Governance Manual, members can ask that an item be removed from the consent agenda before the meeting agenda is posted, but not during the meeting. With that, is there a motion and a second?
I move to consider adoption of the April 16th, 2025 Board of Education meeting agenda.
I'll second.
And this was Josefina Dominguez, board member.
And I'll second Board Member Benavides.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Heather Benavides.
Yes.
Ronaldo Morito.
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes. With that, we will move to minutes approval. Our next item is to consider approval of the minutes from the Board of Education meeting on April 2nd, 2025. Can we have a motion and a second?
I'll move to approve the minutes from the Board of Education meeting on April 2nd, 2025. This is Member Jackson.
I'll second. This is Josefina Dominguez.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Heather Benavides.
Yes.
Ronaldo Morito.
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes. The next item on our agenda is our public forum. Board Vice President Jackson, will you please share the instructions for public forum?
So welcome to our public forum guests. When you signed up to speak, you were asked to review the rules and expectations which our presiding officer will enforce. The New Mexico Open Meetings Act requires that our agendas specify in advance the items that will be discussed and voted on during the meeting. Therefore, public forum is not a dialogue among speakers and board members, but rather a chance to hear from our community. We will call participants to speak in the order they signed up, whether in person or virtual. Those here with us tonight will be asked to come to the microphone at the back of the room when your name is called. Online guests will stay in a virtual waiting room until it is their turn to speak. We have set aside 45 minutes for public forum. Tonight, we have 23 speakers, so each of you will have 1 minute to speak. Once your time is up, you will be asked to quickly wrap up. If you are unable to convey your message, you may email boarded@aps.edu. We have received several emails already. In addition, for those of you who are here tonight, a representative from our service center is here to assist you, and he's sitting right there. Mr. Gonzalez, will you please introduce our speakers?
Thank you, Board Member Jackson. Our first speaker tonight is in person, and it is Mr. Ron Meir, followed by Mr. Tony Watkins. You'll have 1 minute once you begin speaking. Hold on, sir. Let me make sure the speaker is turned on. Yeah, you're good now, sir.
Yes, okay. The 2025 APS Board of Education is on the verge of being the board who cares the least about health and well-being of mid and high school students in the district. Here's the evidence. Back in January, you voted to remove ninth grade health education based on misinformation about community survey. Back in January, you did not ask any relevant questions before you voted to remove ninth grade health education. You have been presented overwhelming evidence by health professionals that removing ninth grade health education was a bad decision, and you continue to ignore the facts. You ignored the voice of over 2,000 community members of the survey who wanted to keep health education in ninth grade, thus ignoring guardrail number 4. You ignored the fact that the skills taught in ninth grade health education classes are essential to navigate high school and help prevent risky behaviors. You say student outcomes are important, but you stick with the removal of ninth grade health education where the skills taught life-changing student outcomes. You ignore the fact that goal number 4 is in the health education standards and benchmarks. You ignore the fact that students beginning ninth grade need to learn the skills from ninth grade health standards and benchmarks.
Mr. Muir, you've gone over your 1 minute. Please wrap up in one quick sentence.
You can reverse this distinction about not caring. At the next board meeting, bring the discretionary credits up for a vote and eliminate the 0.5 elective so the health education can be reinstated into ninth grade. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Tony Watkins, followed by Mr. Daniel Tafoya. Sure, you have 1 minute.
I am here to express grave concern about APS's relationship with the Council of Great City Schools. The family engagement policy has been archived. We understand this is a part of the policy diet to put responsibilities into the hands of the administration on matters the Council of Great City Schools declare are not in the board's purview. The policy needs to apply to board members too. Indeed, elements of the policy are exactly what have been sacrificed by the board entering into a contract with the Council of Great City Schools coaches and adopting SOFG. Coaches intervene during board meetings to guide the direction of the conversation. Emails to board members are screened by APS staff. Messages during public comment are summarized by the board president in a way that censors the content of what people say and prevents us from hearing from other board members. APS likely gets a monetary bonus in its contract with the council if the board votes unanimously to continue with SOFG. In addition to not being equitable, the process is not efficient. The results of the time use study presented on April 22nd revealed that. We asked the contract that APS has with Council of Great City Schools and that the board vote on it with discussion prior to voting on the budget. We need
Mr. Watkins, you've gone over your 1 minute. Please finish one quick sentence.
need a response to these requests by April 21st and can be reached at familycentereducation@gmail.com.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Daniel Tafoya, followed by Janet Harmon. Sir, you have 1 minute once you begin speaking.
Good evening. My name is Daniel Tafoya. I'm here to ask you guys to terminate the contract with Cali Services. Several incidents have been reported from substitute teachers and have gone uninvestigated due to the fact that APS says it's Cali's responsibility and Cali Services says it's APS responsibility. Last week, a substitute was fired for sitting there watching students fight after reporting that 2 days before that those students were going to bring guns to school and nothing was done. I have reported a EA sitting at her desk sleeping with a pill bottle on the floor, nothing done. Several incidents have been reported to you guys, and yet you guys are sitting there not doing nothing. Cali Services is not doing nothing. It needs to stop. APS needs to take the responsibility for substitute teachers and get rid of Cali Services because so many substitute teachers are being fired. So many students, child abuse is happening, and yet you guys are just ignoring everything that has been reported to you guys. Please open your eyes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Janet Harmon. And you'll have 1 minute once you begin speaking. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. This is my first time speaking publicly at a board meeting, so thank you for the opportunity. My name is Janet Harmon. I have 2 sons who graduated from APS since the COVID pandemic. My family's educational journey included 8 of the schools in the system. I am alarmed at the amount of money that I understand APS spends to be affiliated with the Council of Great City Schools and the lack of transparency and communication with the public around this. Increasing student outcome will not happen through more testing and collection of data and through advice from out-of-state coaches. It's our tax dollars. You need to be listening to us, our children and their teachers. Keep this money in the district. It'd be much better spent making up for the Title I cuts that are imminent. It'd be much better spent on ensuring that our schools are safe, nurturing, culturally inclusive environments where our kids want to go. That's what we elected you to do. We didn't elect you to be data wonks. Lessons we learned during the COVID shutdown. Academic achievement is mostly reflected by students' mental, physical, social, and cultural health, not a multiple choice test.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is on Zoom, and that is Sarah Azibo. Are you there?
Yes,
Okay,
Hello.
you have one minute once you begin speaking.
thank you. Hello, Board President and members of the board. My name is Sarah Azibo, speaking on behalf of students and families connected with the New Mexico Asian Family Center. We appreciate the community engagement calendars on the agenda tonight. We are deeply concerned about this process and recent changes that restrict community access to board members. Archiving policy KB, our 14-year-old community-created family engagement policy, and folding it into a limited parents' rights and responsibilities section without public input weakens its purpose, intent, and impact. Furthermore, removing direct email access to board members and filtering messages that don't reach board members creates additional barriers to an already complex system, especially for families who speak languages other than English or Spanish. The recent decision limiting communication of board decisions to only the board president further silences community voices, leaving our families feeling unsupported. Additionally, we are concerned about the contract with the Council of the Great City Schools. While some guidance has been helpful to educators, recent policy changes to board operations specifically lack cultural responsiveness. The $20,000 discount conditional on a unanimous board vote risks pressuring members instead of empowering them to represent their community freely. This is not representative of a democratically elected public school board.
I need to
Last
stop you
sentence.
there. You've gone over your 1 minute. Go ahead and finish that last sentence quickly, please.
We respectfully ask the board to restore open communication, ensure meaningful public input, and hold a transparent discussion on this contract before any vote on the budget. Thank you for your time and service.
Our next speaker is Dr. Chris Meir, and she is in person. Dr. Meir, you have 1 minute once you begin speaking.
I wanted to express my appreciation and thanks for Mr. Mark Garcia for reaching out to me this week. There's a couple of things that I wanted to say. In order to move health ed back to the high school, the board will need to bring back the discretionary units for a vote and remove the 0.5 elective from the 1.5 elective offerings. And make it clear to the superintendent that the reason you are doing it is so health ed can be moved back to 9th grade. This is still the best move for the students of Albuquerque Public Schools. I'm imploring you to stop waiting and bring the health ed graduation requirement back to 9th grade. Second, if you and APS are not willing to bring back health ed to 9th grade, Mr. Garcia informed me that APS has set up a committee to help roll out the health ed graduation requirement in 8th grade. I discussed with him that I am willing to serve as a voluntary consultant on that committee. I can provide expert insight to this group. Although voting to eliminate the 0.5 elective and put health ed back into 9th grade is the best option, I am willing to help to be part of the solution and make it work for our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Meir. Our next speaker is on Zoom, Bradley Ross.
Hi, thank you so much.
You'll have 1
my-
minute. Sorry, I just want to make sure you have 1 minute once you begin speaking. Thank you.
Thank you. My kids attend school in District 3, and I was looking forward to the recent round of in-person town hall meetings with my school board representative. The APS website announcing the upcoming budget talks said these meetings would help gauge the community's priorities and inform budget the budget discussion. I wanted to express my concerns about the APS's student-focused outcomes governance model and what I see as anti-democratic policies within that model, including a policy decision that doesn't allow board members to discuss dissenting opinions with the media after a vote. Unfortunately, I couldn't discuss those concerns with the town hall because my district's in-person meeting was held with little notice on February 4th and only included 45 students. And the other district board members held in-person meetings that included parents who could speak and have discussions. So it appears that their comments were collected and helped inform the APS budget priorities. I'm concerned that our board president and the policies put forward by the Council of the Great City Schools are discouraging and disenfranchising to members of the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Our next speaker is Megan Long. She is also on Zoom. Megan, are you there? Whoops.
Yes, I'm here.
Megan, 1 second. We have a technical difficulty we need to resolve. Just 1 second. Okay. So Megan, you'll have 1 minute once you begin speaking.
Okay. Good evening, board members. I'm speaking today on agenda item 5.1, the SOFG self-evaluation that board members are performing. The self-evaluation is modeled after a corporate structure that is ultimately a waste of time. Why are we allowing the Council of Great City Schools to infiltrate our board with their guidance and coaching when their influence has led to the disengagement of the community and is anti-democratic? We did not vote these coaches onto the board. We, as your constituents, are not in support of any continued guidance or coaching from CGCS. The board has become increasingly inaccessible to the very people they serve. There have been multiple attempts to censor and silence board members under oppressive policies and an overall lack of trust and unity. As a constituent of District 3, I no longer have any confidence in the president, and her ear is held by CGCS, and she's beholden to them and not her constituents. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is in person, Miss Janet Sayers. And you'll have 1 minute once you begin speaking.
Believe it, that's hardly long to say hello, much less anything of substance. But Madam President, board members, Superintendent Blakey, and APS staff, quick comment on community engagement. I had hoped to see a few of you last night at our the Deaf and Hard of Hearing open house. It was really nice. It was at Del Norte High School, and probably about 30 plus families were there. And I'm not sure how that fits into this whole community engagement, but it was a nice opportunity. I was able to meet some folks. Then last week on Friday and Saturday, I happened to be at the Bonifacio building for the fabulous Metro Art, which is still open until Wednesday every day, and connected with some families who were there with their kids, and they were so proud, you know, looking at what and that was on Saturday. But I wanted to say something's wrong with the heating cooling at Bonifacio. The middle, the big part was like 85 degrees, and the perimeter was like freezing cold. So and that was twice. That was both Friday and Saturday. And I know the great computer in the sky manages everything. But
Mrs. Sayers, I'm sorry, it's over 1 minute. Can you please wrap up quickly in one sentence?
I'm hoping that can be adjusted better.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is on Zoom. And I'm going to go with, is it Erin?
Erin, wow, good job.
Erin Demas.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. You have 1 minute when you begin speaking. Sorry.
Okay. Good evening. As a concerned parent and a voting constituent, I want to see a full copy of the upcoming renewal contract with the Council of the Great City Schools. In addition, there needs to be time for community groups to review the contract and a full-throated discussion on the dais before renewing the contract. As a citizen looking in, CGCS does not encourage community-centered education. Board members are elected officials meant to oversee the APS administration and represent the concerns and interests of their constituents. Under the guidance of the CGCS, this board's ability is severely limited in both of those areas. Considering the fact that the APS board adopted the student Outcomes Focused Governance Model in 2022, and our students continue to score among the lowest in the nation, maybe it's time for a change. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, looks like our next speaker is on Zoom, and that is going to be Marco Valdez.
Hi, hello. So I am a student from Polk Middle School. I'm in 7th grade, and I'm here to talk about our outdoor learning activities and how we do that at school. So at our school, we have a farm. We usually go out there every Friday to help on it. But what really bugs me about our school outdoor learning is that we don't really get as much as outdoor learning as we'd like. And usually whenever we get outdoor learning, it's only for a couple minutes. The only class we really do it in is environmental sustainability, which is basically all about outdoor learning. And I just really want to emphasize how none of our other classes really take us out. And I feel like that should be a problem because we should learn how to interact with our environment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, our next speaker is Esteban Cordova. Esteban, are you there? Esteban, are you there? Okay, I'll try to move on to the next one. We have a few Zoom people that aren't. So we're going to go ahead and go to Catherine Mitchell. You'll have 1 minute once you begin speaking.
Madam President, board members, Superintendent Blakey, my name is Casey Mitchell, and I'm a teacher librarian at Alvarado Elementary in the North Valley. I'm a member of the Outdoor Learning Teacher Advisory Group, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of you this evening. In 2024, Alvarado was honored with the National ESEA Distinguished Schools Award for Exceptional Student Growth, making us the only school in APS history to receive this national recognition. This year, the New Mexico PED also awarded us the Bilingual Multicultural Education Recognition Award for 2025. These incredible achievements are a reflection of our school-wide commitment to equity, innovation, and student success. One of the most impactful elements of our journey has been outdoor learning. Integrating outdoor learning into our curriculum has provided students with meaningful hands-on experiences that support academic growth, foster language development, and cultivate a deeper connection with our community and the environment. We're proud of the work we're doing and even more proud of our students for rising to meet every challenge. This evening, I ask for your continued support of outdoor learning within APS while also looking for ways to expand these opportunities to students throughout our district. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to try our Zoom attendees. Esteban Cordova and Travis McKenzie, are you there?
I am here. Esteban said he was having trouble joining in.
Okay. Travis, you'll have 1 minute once you begin speaking, and we'll try with Esteban in just a minute.
Oh, great. Well, I'm a very proud teacher at Polk Middle School. I want to shout out Marco Valdez, who just spoke, but we are here in support of outdoor learning. We have a farm on our campus, and we're a part of the APS Outdoor Learning Teacher Advocacy Group. And we would just like to see more outdoor learning incorporated across our district. We'd like to show support for our outdoor learning, school gardens, see more grade level field trips. I think it's happening at the elementary level, but we'd like to see that into the middle school level, and really see the district embrace outdoor learning as one of the main components to what we do. I think it's a strength that APS has and something that we like a lot of support in. We really appreciate all the teachers that advocate for outdoor learning, and we want to see it happen more at the district level and more support across all schools. And just to conclude, I stand in solidarity with everything that's been said about the Council for Great City Schools and hope that the board can incorporate community voice into this process and that we don't renew the contract. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And our next speaker is going to be Carrie Kaiser, but hold on one second, please. Okay. Are you there?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
You'll have 1 minute once you begin speaking.
Thank you. Good evening, board president, members of the board. I'm Carrie Kaiser, and I have a third grade kid in APS schools. First of all, I do want to recognize the efforts that went into developing the goals and guardrails with a lot of community input. I think as you can see from the comments tonight, we have a really passionate community here in APS that really cares about our students and their life skills. But I'm here tonight because I am concerned about the sizable influence of the SOFG coaches and some of the changes with regards to board policies and the government manual that maybe are done in the name of efficiency, but have placed a lot of limits on topics that can be covered, the way that the board interacts with constituents. And so I just want to say that our board is made up of locally elected representatives, and that these are the people who should be making decisions in partnership with the community that has elected them. If the SOFG coaching stands in the way of the school board's ability to make decisions, I would urge you to discontinue it, starting with eliminating budget items that fund SOFG coaching, because that money belongs here in our classrooms, not in the pockets of consultants. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is in person. Let me check in and so I can get Esteban. Esteban, are you there? Okay, we're going to go in person. Brandy Ami, you'll have 1 minute once you begin speaking.
I'm Brandy. I am from the Pueblo of Laguna, and I bought a home in Albuquerque in 2021. My daughter's been a student at APS for a number of years. She's a transfer currently into Albuquerque High. 2 weeks ago, she was jumped at school. The administration didn't seem to give two licks. They sent her home without any kind of understanding of what would happen next. They didn't even contact me. They had her call from the school because her phone had been stolen during the altercation, and basically just made sure she had a ride. So I sent an email, followed up. They called me eventually later on that evening, but didn't give me any kind of confidence that this was something that they were going to deal with. Essentially, I was told that she was being suspended because the video they saw, she was fighting back. And so it is now in her record that she is the offender. The videos that I was able to obtain, she was not the offender. She was the one being attacked, and by two individuals at that. And so I want a better understanding of why the policies don't actually support the victims in this manner. When our children continue to be attacked by individuals, why is there still this leeway or making sense that it doesn't make sense that the victim is also to blame and then suspended? Because
I'm sorry, ma'am, I have to cut you off. You've gone over your 1 minute. Can you wrap it up in one quick sentence, please?
What I would like to see is stronger policies that support our victims and help them attain better understanding for going forward with those that have been the cause for the issue.
Thank you. Okay. Esteban, are you there? I know we've been working with you.
Hello?
How about, oh, you there? Okay, Esteban, I hear you.
Oh, okay.
You've got 1 minute.
I want to talk about outdoor learning as I am a student from Polk Middle School. And I want to talk about why it's important because it's help educate the student about gardening, about composting. It's also helping the student stay safe or healthy from the vitamin D coming from the sun. Also, if the student knows how to properly use a garden and they do make a garden, they wouldn't waste any of their money on the supermarket's fruits and vegetables, as the supermarket's fruits and vegetables have chemicals on them. And that the reason why outdoor learning is so important for our school, because it's helping our school get fresh fruits and vegetables in our cafeteria outdoor learning. It's also super important because of compost. Now, compost is when a fruit or vegetable is converted into fertilizer, which can then be made for fruits and vegetables. If we start composting, we'll be able to make more fruits and vegetables without wasting any food. Outdoor learning is also important because it can help our stamina and mental health, as we sometimes have to dig soil for our plants or have to dig a trench, or even maybe plant some seeds as we are gaining energy from the activities we do. Sometimes we even get prizes like last week we got M&Ms, or we can sometimes take home vegetables or fruits, which is way better than staring at the classroom and staring at a screen, which is unhealthy, which can hurt our eyes and our backs from leaning over.
Thank you, Mr. Cordova. Okay, our next speaker is Lauren Micklejohn. Lauren, are you there?
How about now?
I can hear you now. You have 1
Okay.
minute once you begin speaking.
All right. Good evening, Madam President, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm here to speak to agenda items 5 and 7.2. And I will say that I enjoy reading student behavior doesn't change until adult behavior changes. That's nicely posted on the dais, because sometimes I think that maybe some of the behavior I see behind the dais does not reflect that motto. I'm here primarily tonight to talk about student outcomes focused governance, and also the self-evaluation that's upcoming. I appreciate that the student outcomes focused governance has provided some needed structure, but I'm very concerned about the role of the Council for Greater City Schools in determining the direction of our board. I'd like to please ask you to consider not renewing your contract with CGCS. We support the goals and guardrails as articulated by APS and the board reached through the CGCS framework and the coaching process, but it is extremely lacking in its follow through and execution by the board through the relationships with its constituents, especially where the correlated guardrails are concerned. There are too many contradictions in board behavior between what they're saying and the guardrails and goals, and they're not reflected in board behavior, such as the board dynamics in public, the board's characterization of public comment in her summaries at the ends of the meeting, which seems
Lauren,
to
I'm sorry, I have to
misrepresent-
stop you. You've gone over your minute. Can you please wrap up in a quick sentence?
Yes, shutting out constituents in the right sizing and redistricting consultant discussions, and also archiving community engagement policy with no notice or input from stakeholders. So thank you very much for your time and your attention, and very grateful for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sally Radicki. Sorry, Sally DeRadke. Sally, you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes. You have 1 minute
Okay,
once you
great.
begin speaking.
Hi, I speak to you as a constituent of District 3 and an APS parent. I have concern about the contract with the Council of Great City Schools. As a taxpayer, I hope to see money staying in our community and schools with locally employed individuals, not going to a corporation with consultants. Furthermore, the student outcomes focused government seems to place decisions on a narrow scope of school measures. And it doesn't seem to align with the goals and guardrails that were thoughtfully developed with community engagement. The Council of Great City Schools and their student outcomes government is causing separation between the board members and their constituents, which contradicts the purpose of the publicly elected school board members. I would like to see more focus on school safety, culturally welcome schools, small class sizes, healthy school lunches, transportation, efforts toward gender and racial equity, and so many other things that are not technically falling under student outcomes focused governance. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next speaker is in the room, Dr. Sinello, followed by Mary Walker Herrera. Dr. Sinello, you have 1 minute once you begin speaking.
Good evening, Madam President and school board members and superintendent. This is part 2 from last meeting. Do you remember your oath of office, section 22-5-4 of the Public School Code? A local school board shall have the following powers or duties. Point A, subject to the rules of the department, to develop educational policies for the school district. Shouldn't you develop educational policies, not sexual policies of protecting children from indoctrination with gender ideology? Should we must return to common sense of biology reality? According to Federal Department of Education, schools that fail to comply could, consistent with applicable law, face investigation and loss of federal funding. By natural right and moral authority, parents are the primary protectors of their children. Education Secretary McMahon write, and I quote, "As any mother would be, I have been appalled to learn how schools are routinely hiding information about the mental and physical health of their students from parents," end quote. And no government agent, as a taxpayer, including the local schools, should be keeping secrets from us about our child or children that will hinder our fundamental rights.
Dr. Snell, please wrap up in a very quick, short sentence.
That will hinder our fundamental rights to direct their upbringing, education, and care. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
On APS.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Mary Walker Herrera, followed by Renee Pacheco. You'll have 1 minute, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So good evening, Madam President and school board members and APS Superintendent. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm an EA in special education in a severe needs elementary classroom, and my name is Mary Walker Herrera. I have a poem here by a detransitioner. The definition for detransitioner, in case that may be a new term for anyone, is someone who ceases or reverses their gender transition, and that may be through a surgery or through hormone blocking. The author is anonymous. The title is Used. When changes stopped feeling new, I started to miss when I was a kid, and the pain, it still grew. Despite what the doctors did, they said that I seem mad, as if anger is unjustified. I'm just selfish, bitter, and sad that I was modified for life. I wish I were angrier sometimes. It's not easy to be so complacent. The rejection takes a hold of me. It's hard to feel so helpless. We're just followers who went astray. You call us traitors, but we're the betrayed. It doesn't matter if the news is on your side. If you've got statistics, if you think you have nothing to hide, we're all still out here.
Okay, I've got to stop you. I've got to stop you there. You've gone over your 1 minute. Can you please wrap up in a quick sentence?
We won't be quiet forever. A storm is coming.
Thank you, ma'am. Renee Pacheco, followed by Brian Rice. You'll have 1 minute once you begin speaking.
All right, good evening. October 1st, 2024, Bernalillo County announced that in collaboration with Wellness Equity Alliance and APS, Health Yeah is offering primary care. These are mobile clinics at our schools provided for and funded through a federal grant of $422,031 from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, part of a $1.5 million and reoccurring from Bernalillo County's behavioral health gross receipts tax. An executive order was issued and signed on January 28th, 2025 by our current president, protecting children from chemical and surgical mutilation. These services that are offered by these clinics are gender affirming care. And what's offered in gender affirming care is chemicals that are called puberty blockers and hormone therapy. While
Ma'am, you've gone over your 1 minute. Can you wrap up in one quick short sentence?
I wanted to know that what you're doing is how is it protecting our kids when our parents are not able to know what their students are getting. The ones that are 14 years and older do not require parental permission to obtain these services, and these health clinics do not have to disclose to parents
Okay,
which
ma'am. Thank you.
are receives.
Thank you, ma'am. Brian Rice, you'll have 1 minute once you begin speaking.
Thank you very much. I come as a parent. In regards to a FAPE violation, I brought this to the attention to Administrator Mackey at the school. He has rebuffed me and gaslighted me, so now I'm bringing it to your attention. My daughter has an IEP, which states that in her general classes, she should get a rubric to help her understand what the assignments are or what the merits of the assignments are. She was given, and the whole class was 7 lines for a 288-point final project assignment. The FAPE violation is the assignment was graded by peers and peers alone. And to my understanding, students are not trained to assess other students. I've showed this to Mr. Mackey. I pointed where it said, literally peer grading. Down here at the bottom, at the second part, 18 students by 14 points for 252 possible points. Those were peer awarded too. I showed that to Mr. Mackey, and I showed him where the teacher literally counted up my daughter's score for her peers, 14 points. So 18 students in the class, 14 points, 250. This was peer assessed, and that is not appropriate. If we want student outcomes to change, then perhaps we need to stop doing the lemons dance with the administrators and change them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Board members, that completes public forum for this evening.
Great, and thank you to our public forum guests. The next agenda item is agenda item 4.1 to consider adoption of the APS Board of Education Student Outcomes Focused Governance Self-Evaluation for Year 3, Quarter 2. And before we begin our self-evaluation discussion, I'd like to take a quick moment to introduce our staff and our board members to our new SOFG coach, Sendel Revelary. Sendel is on Zoom, and we received an email earlier this afternoon introducing Sendel. He's a former school board member and was the vice president of the board in Chicago Public Schools and is a fully certified SOFG coach. I'd like to give Sendel an opportunity just to come off camera real quick and just say hi.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, President Gonzalez, and thank you to everyone else who's present. I'm really honored and excited to have the opportunity to work with the Albuquerque Public Schools governance team in your continued progress towards being more student outcomes focused in your governance and improving outcomes for your students. That is the purpose of all our public schools, and I think it's extremely important work. Obviously, for most board members, uncompensated and often thankless work. Important nonetheless to represent the vision and values of the community and to stay focused on governing in a way that helps students achieve the futures to which they're entitled. I look forward to working with you and to talking with each of you soon and to joining you for future meetings as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Sendel will be staying online for the self-evaluation discussion. So if we have any questions about the SOFG framework and need to phone a friend, we have Sendel online to support us in that way. As we all know, student outcomes focused governance is a framework that is designed to drive the board's ability to function most effectively to deliver on our collective promise to improve student outcomes. This is the process. This is about what we're about to go through is the process for calibration and recalibration against the SOFG rubric that allows us to align and realign our governing behaviors with those most effective in creating the context for improving student outcomes. And we know they're most effective because of the research base and the extensive research that has been done on this rubric. Board members have been asked to individually complete the self-evaluation form for our actions from the last quarter. The majority of us have done this. All 6 of us completed it, not necessarily by the deadline, but I was able to incorporate all of the scores and submitted our individual results to inform tonight's discussion. And so since I received all of the scores as of yesterday, I used today to conduct my analysis. So I'm handing out right now so you can see the score. So board members can see the scores that were provided by your peer board members. Before we begin, does anyone have any questions about the process? All right, thank you. I'll now review the results for each of the 6 competencies of the SOFG self-evaluation. I will share our collective scores for each competency, and then I'll pause for questions or comments before proceeding. At the end of the review, we'll have a brief conversation about what we feel is possible by the end of our next quarter. So we did receive scores from 6 board members, and the total of those scores ranges from 30 to 63. So we have a range of 33 points in our evaluation. Across each competency, there was not one where all 6 of us agreed. So we'll go through and we'll discuss all 6 competencies. And so what we have in front of us, board members, is each member's score. You have a column that indicates the consensus. So that is the score that was most common, or the mode that occurred most across all of the board member scores. And then a final column that's calibrated and final. So this is the score based off of a conversation with both of our SOFG coaches this morning, going line by line through the SOFG framework and each of our scores. And so I can explain where there are differences and how we landed where we did. But at the end of the day, it'll be the 6 of us that are agreeing on the score that we settle on for this quarter and that we accept. So for vision and goals, individually board members rated us as having achieved what we ended up with as a consensus of a 35. If you're looking at the document, there was a range here. Previously, last quarter, we had a 35. A couple of board members had us ranked at a 25, which would be that we would have lost a couple of points on the mastery. And those were that was all related to the specific component around the process that we used to garner feedback and whether that process led to community ownership of the goals. And so there was some conversation around how do we know if there's community ownership? It's subjective rather. But the reason that we rewarded ourselves 35 last time and why we should stay at 35 this time is because of the process. So the process is the thing that we could measure. The process was designed to be inclusive, to include staff, educators, students, families, and to get to that ownership. So we all could make a case that we're not at ownership. I'm sure I could walk out the door and ask somebody if they know about our goals and guardrails, and they probably don't, and they probably don't own them. But what is being measured here is the process. And so based on the conversation with our coaches, the final recommendation is 35 points for vision and values. And so I will open it up if anyone wants to share any evidence as to why you think we should have a different score.
I'm happy to offer.
Board Member Dominguez.
I was one of the board members who listed 25 points and potentially less than that, though I opted for grace. And the reason for grace is because I am the genesis of change. And I have not broached this topic on the dais prior to today. And so I'll have my say, and then I hope things will change to help us move upward in those points. We need to revisit the parameters that dictate when we are allowed, and in quotation marks, to ask for a root cause analysis. So for example, currently the root cause analysis.
I'm sorry, Member Dominguez, can you make sure that we're speaking to the vision and goals and the rubric itself?
Well, I take issue with the rubric itself. What I'm suggesting is that.
Which is fine, but per Open Meetings Act, we do have to make sure that we're sticking to the agenda items. And so I just want to make sure that we're not straying from the self-evaluation.
This has to do with our self-evaluation. I find it static. I think it's time to rethink what we are measuring. There has been, let me get to that point. And you mentioned it, we've lost the community's sense of ownership of the goals, feedback from parents. For example, question best practices, what best practices say about so much screen time as part of class time in the name of accomplishing goals 1 and 2. And that feedback tells me that they don't fully understand our process. Another topic is that we as a board have not been clear about the distinction between board articulated goals and the superintendent's control of interim goals. And the interims are what we are measuring. And that confusion has created a sense that we are we have a reporting system that the community
cannot follow or access. And so while the rubric says, okay, you get 35 points because you have these goals and guardrails, there's a disconnect. And it's time to take ownership of this rubric so that the vision aligns with our mission to inform the public of our process. Thank you.
Thank you. And so the question was, is there any evidence as to whether the board, to indicate that the board has not used a process that included students, parents, staff, and community members to allow them to express their goals? So I hear that you have issues with the process, the framework itself, and concerns about that. But is there evidence that the board did not use a process so we don't earn that 35? And I know Member Jackson had your hand raised as well.
Well, yeah, Madam President, I had my hand raised because you actually just addressed the reason that I did 25 originally is that I probably couldn't walk out the door and say to anybody out there what the 4 goals are. But we did go through a very robust process. And in fact, it was actually stated a few times in public forum that there was a robust process that we went through to establish the goals and the guardrails. So I feel confident that the process was done. So I am putting my number back to 35 just for my I'm putting it back to 35.
So we are, our coach's recommendation, the calibration is 35. Are folks okay with 35? No. Okay. Member Tomorito.
Pause. I put 25 and I'm also in agreement with what Josefina said, but I also know that, yes, I get the rubric. Yes, I understand the self-evaluation. But I think many times, and just as Courtney also stated with the public comment about the goals and how we, in the beginning, made sure that the voice of the community was involved. But oftentimes I feel that we are not including the voice of the community in every moment of whatever action we take or whatever we do when it comes to that voice of community. And so that was one reason for grading it the way I graded it, and that was 25. Because I often have felt too, when we're looking at trying to raise the score up to 35, there are some issues when it comes to how we not only hear and listen to the community, but the other thing is, do we actually as a board take that conversation and effectively as a board hear out what's going on with the community and make some decisions? Because I repeatedly hear community concerns, but I don't see us taking them on. And I feel that the community, when these concerns are brought up, yes, it seems like we're not hearing them and that we're just passing it by. But I often feel, yes, when we're evaluating ourselves, I think it's very apparent that we are lacking to really hear what's going on. And then we want to grade ourselves as a board and we want a high score, but I feel we're leaving out the voice of those who do really matter. And that's my reason for 25.
Thank you. So again, I'll just state that while both board members have made compelling cases for how we can improve community engagement and how there's more that we can do to ensure that there's community ownership over our goals, which I agree with, the rubric asks if there was a process used in 2022 that included students, parents, staff, and community members, and our coaches felt that we met that requirement, and we felt we met that requirement last time. So are we okay with 35 or do we want to move to 25? Like, we're okay. 1, 2. So majority is okay with 35. Okay, so I'll keep 35 there and we will move to values and guardrails. So individually, board members rated us as having achieved a 10. And this is where the consensus, the number that occurred the most was a 10, and the calibration was a 10. However, we ranged from 5 to 15. And so if we're starting at 10 with our marker, does anyone have any evidence for why we should not be a 10 that they would like to present?
Not be. Yes.
Member Dominguez.
Again, I find the rubric is not in alignment with, we need to modify it to fit the moment. We've gone beyond, I feel like it's a gimme grade at this point. We've gone beyond, yes, we did a good job of listening to the community initially. We came up with the goals and the guardrails. But it's time to move forward and incorporate, modify what the community is, what the community feedback is. And so.
And I hear you and I agree with you. And we do have community engagement later on in our agenda on 6.2. But in terms of evidence to counter the score of 10 on values and guardrails, do you have evidence? And again, this is related to whether the superintendent has provided interim guardrail ending points, that all interim guardrails pertain to outputs or outcomes, that the board included students, parents, staff, and community members in the guardrail development process. The board has considered and adopted a theory of action. All board guardrails last from 3 to 5 years, and the guardrails, interim guardrails, and theories of action will challenge the organization. I noted you ranked this as a
5. And since you brought up interims, I would argue that we have not done a good job of communicating those interims. In fact, it's been a point of contention among the community. They don't understand. They feel like we keep moving the goalposts, we're changing rules. And so that compels me to give us a 5 until we can modify things to fairly evaluate where we stand with our community.
Yep, which I hear you, but communicating guardrails is not on the rubric. And so if there's evidence, well, I hear you that you believe it should be, and we'll note that in the minutes. Were there others who had evidence or that we should not be a 10? Or would suggest otherwise? If not, we can accept the 10 and move forward. All right, monitoring and accountability. Individual board members rated us as having achieved a 10 also. Although on this one, we ranged from 0 to 10. And so what the 10 for monitoring and accountability includes is that we invest no less than 10% of our board authorized time monitoring our goals. It's that yellow column. Superintendent led the interim goals and guardrails monitoring calendar. So we've marked off those things. We had a couple of zeros, but in the conversation with our coaches, the coaches agreed that we are at the approaching student outcomes column, which is that 10 points. So is there anyone who has evidence that we're not at the 10 points and you'd like to share?
I'm going to make a pitch again for
Member Dominguez, go ahead.
Reconsidering and adding, modifying the rubric. I'd like to see included meaningful community engagement that challenges the board toward continuous improvement. And yes, I did receive what I also had in my evaluation was that per the rubric, we failed to reach devoting 10% of our board meetings time on progress monitoring, but Coach Paz reached out and clarified that through some new calculation, and I have yet to talk to her about it, we came to 27%. And until I know why, I can't comment on that. Yeah, well.
So I did review the time use calendar, time use evaluation with both of our coaches. And there's a couple of things which I can just say quickly. One was related to how the finance and audit committees were counted. So there was an error there with those being counted. And then the second was as it related to the community engagement hours. And so board services staff did some analysis of the community engagement events that took place over this quarter and made an estimate of the amount of hours that would be SOFG oriented in those. And so those were then integrated. And so with those two changes, that shifted the numbers to 27, so you said 26, 27.
27%.
So for the last quarter, our time use was 27% based on the final review. And so that has us at the 10.
And I'll provide grace and say 5 on my part.
Well, 5 isn't a score. Sorry.
Well then.
Okay. Anyone else?
Madam President.
Yes, Member Jackson.
So I will, based on that information about the time use, I will bump my score back up to 10. Because with the presentation from last time, we hadn't bumped 10%, but with the evaluation from our coaches, I'm satisfied with moving back.
Yes. And I do have the documentation of that from the conversation that I had with the two coaches this morning. So it's in the tab in the time use monitoring, but I'll share it in the weekly email so everyone can see that as well. Okay, so we're good with 10 for monitoring and accountability. Okay, for mostly for communication and collaboration, perhaps there was the most consensus here with the score of a 1. And this is for unity and trust. So most of us rated a 1. The most common number was a 1. And in the calibration conversation with our coaches, we determined that it is a 1. That puts us in the approaching student outcomes category. And I'll just say that we were very close to meeting student outcomes focus, which is the 5 points. However, we did have a couple of meetings that lasted more than 3 hours. But other than that, we're doing pretty good and almost getting into that meeting student outcomes focused. And so is everyone good with the 1? Yes, okay. So the next one is, where am I at? Continuous improvement, unity and trust. So individually, board members rated us as having achieved a 1 also. The range on this was from 0 to 3. The most common ranking was a 1 and the calibrated score was a 1. So for unity and trust, that would also put us in approaching student outcomes focus. That's the orange, peachish, yellowish column. Is there anyone who has evidence for why we would not be a 1?
Yeah.
Member Dominguez.
The process that we took with the annual governance manual review was worrisome. I think it showed in a very real way that we can't get past a 4-3 split on the board. I mean, some of our suggestions were completely shuttered out. And so I think there is room for improvement there.
So in terms of the rubric, do you have any evidence related to the rubric itself?
No, other than to say the rubric needs some revision.
Yep, that has been noted. Also discussed this with our coaches this morning, and their response was there's not actually any research that suggests that split boards can't be functional. And in fact, having multiple different perspectives is actually healthy in discourse. But the research does, however, suggest that the indicators in this framework are actually correlated with effective and functional boards. So we can have that conversation with our coaches and a review of the research should folks desire. Is there anyone else who would like to make the case that we do not deserve a 1 or provide evidence? Okay, so then we will move on to continuous improvement. So individually, board members rated us as having achieved a 1. This is similar to Unity and Trust. We ranged from 0 to 1. The most common ranking was a 1, and the calibrated number with our coaches is a 1. This puts us in the approaching student outcomes focus category. There were questions about how we're tracking our use of time and if we're tracking the estimated annual cost of staff time. And so we are doing both of those things. Board Services has been working on tracking the annual cost of staff time and shared a report with me, the superintendent, and the chief of staff yesterday. And we're getting feedback on that from the council, and we'll share that feedback back. However, we are doing the annual staff time counting. And I can share the email with folks if you want to see that number. But does anyone have evidence to suggest that we are not the 1?
Madam President, I did not, I'm not going to suggest evidence that we're not at a 1. I agree with that, but I just wanted to thank you for providing the information about the annual cost of staff time, because I did not check that box, particularly because I didn't think that we had that information. And so that would be helpful to see. So thank you.
Yeah, it's collected quarterly and we've shared it quarterly. It's just another example of us trying to figure out exactly how to count it because it's really complex, and we're working on it.
Thank you.
And Board Services is working on it, and all APS staff is super amazing, and we love you for supporting our board and counting how much time you're spending supporting us. Thank you. Okay. So with that, then we have a 1 for continuous improvement. And so our total then for this quarter is a 58. And then now we need to set our goal for the next quarter. I did have this conversation with our coaches as well, but based on where we were lacking points, I did mention the board meetings being over 3 hours. If we can get those under 3 hours, we gain those points there. And there's one other one where we'll earn a lot of points, but I can't find it in my notes. But based on the recommendations from our coaches, we would be at a 72 next quarter with some minor tweaks that would make a big difference. So the recommended goal for next quarter is a 72. However, I would like to open it up to the board and hear from members what you believe is possible for the next self-evaluation in the next quarter. So who would like to share their thoughts on that? I have yours. I think, did you project your? No, you didn't. Okay.
14 more points. Madam President.
Yes. Member Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of looking through. I think if we can get to the 3 hours or under the 3 hours, that'll give us 4 points. And then I think a big chunk of the 10 would.
Sendel, do you remember what was the other point where we would earn those?
One aspect was under monitoring and accountability. In the third green column, the third indicator, that every goal is monitored at least 4 times per year. And I believe you all are approving your new monitoring calendar at your May 7th meeting, or you're scheduled to.
Yes, thank you for that. That's actually written on the top of my notes. So that was where we didn't earn the points, was because we're not monitoring every goal at least 4 times a year. We are approving a new progress monitoring calendar, potentially, that's on the agenda, on May 7th, which would adjust that. So that would earn us those points. Thank you for that. I did need to phone a friend. So we would earn those points, and that would put us to 72 potentially. Does anyone have any other recommendations or feedback on how, what you would recommend for the goal for next quarter?
I'm sorry.
Yours was agreed.
Yeah, I do agree.
Yours was in there.
I just wanted to congratulate us for being able to check off attendance at all regularly scheduled board meetings was over 80% during the previous 3-month period. When I analyzed that, I didn't think we were going to be able to meet that, and we did. So that's fantastic, and I'm really glad we did. So good participation.
Yes, we did discuss that in our calibration conversation, so I could provide more context on why we made it, but
Yeah.
okay. I also understand that we can move up in continuous improvement after we do our training of community members on SOFG. So that is in the community engagement calendar, potentially set for July. And that in continuous improvement is the second indicator. The board has hosted and board members have led or co-led at least one training session. So we could also earn 2 more points there. So that would put us potentially to 75 as a goal for the next quarter. Do people feel okay with that? Let's do it. All right. Okay. 75. At this time, I will entertain a motion in consideration of our quarterly self-evaluation. And the motion should state that I moved that we accept our quarterly self-evaluation score of 58 points on the Student Outcomes Focused Governance Self-Evaluation Instrument. Is there a motion and a second?
I move that we, I'm sorry, I did not write that down. So I move that we accept, oh, thank you. Which one is it? It's adoption of the APS Board of Education. Okay, I move that we accept the APS Board of Education Student Outcomes Focused Governance Self-Evaluation for year 3, quarter 2, in the amount of 58 points. This is Board Member Benavides. My apologies.
That's okay. Thank you for that. We do that every single time also, that it's in my script and no one else has it. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? All right, Dr. Albright, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Josefina Dominguez.
I will go with the consensus with the understanding that next time I expect revisions. So, yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Heather Benavides.
Yes.
Ronaldo Tomorito.
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes. So the motion carries, and our next item is to consider approval of the consent agenda. So at this point, I need a motion and a second to approve items 5.1 through 5.3.
I move to approve consent agenda items 6.1 through 6.3.
And I will second. This is Board Member Benavides.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Why is that so weird? To approve the consent agenda, which is items 6.1 through 6.3. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
I'm confused. Josefina Dominguez.
Wait, actually, we'll just pause a point of parliamentary order. I do believe it's 5.1.
Right. I think it's the agenda. It's 6.1.
6.1.
6.1.
Okay. So the script that Dr. Albright and I have, I think, is numbered incorrectly, but the actual board agenda online has the consent agenda as 6.1
6.1.
and then 6.1 through 6.3. Okay, so we will vote on that.
Thank you. And Ms. Jackson motioned and who seconded?
I did.
Member Benavides.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Heather Benavides.
Yes.
Ronaldo Tomorito.
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes. So that motion carries. And the next item on our agenda is agenda item 7.1. Budget presentation on operational funds and federal state programs. Our presenters for this item are Renette Apodaca, Chief Financial Officer, Rosalinda Montoya, Executive Director of Budget and Strategic Planning, Dr. Antonio Gonzalez, Deputy Superintendent of Leadership and Learning, and Dr. Melanie Blay, Executive Director of Federal and State Programs. Our superintendent will introduce this agenda item, so I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Blakey.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Tonight's presentation is the final in a series of budget updates that we have shared with the board and the public over the past few months. Throughout the process, we have welcomed questions and worked to answer them as transparently as possible. We have included all of the Q&A documents with each agenda as part of public record. We've also paid close attention to a question we hear often from board members, which is, what are you doing differently? And I think that is a fair question and one that we have taken seriously, and I hope that you see it as you review the information. Earlier presentations have highlighted some of the changes that we have made, and you'll hear more of that tonight. In your packet, you saw a slide titled What We Heard and What We've Done, and that reflects the work that we've done to change things, including the establishment of the new federal and states programs office. This office was created to break down silos and ensure that federal and state dollars are being used effectively and not duplicated across the district and aligned with what students need the most. We have also tied our budgeting process to a performance framework. That means that schools that are seeing strong outcomes get the autonomy to keep doing what is working, while those that need more support are receiving more support with specific allocations. And most importantly, we're aligning the budget to our goals. As you have seen in what you have reviewed, you will continue seeing during our monitoring sessions. We have come a long way in a year, but this is just the beginning, and we still face challenges like our declining enrollment, a trend that we're seeing across the country. But we also have momentum, and I hope that you see that. With that, Ms. Apodaca and the team and I are prepared to answer any questions that you may have over the presentation.
Thank you.
We are open for questions.
Thank you. Board members, are there any questions? Member Jackson.
Thank you. I'm really excited because I've actually been waiting a year to ask this question, almost a year. So May 1st last year, we were discussing the budget, and the question that I asked was, well, the statement I made was that I had been sitting in this chair for 3 years, and I continued to hear that you guys were looking at programs, you were looking at redundancies, you were looking at efficiencies, and that you were working on it, and that programs that potentially weren't bringing forth the benefit for our students that they should be, that you were looking at it. And at 7:04 p.m., and I know this because I went back to review the meeting. At 7:04 p.m., I said, so Dr. Blakey, can you assure me that when we discuss this budget in a year, you will assure me that the redundancies and the inefficiencies have been looked at and addressed? And you said yes. So here we are almost a year later. And my question is, what evidence do you have? What strategies have you undertaken? Some of them are listed in your budget presentation, but what proof do you have that you have addressed and you have made the assurance that I asked a year ago as it relates to our budget, especially given the fact that we have a larger budget now with fewer students, and we need to make sure that those redundancies are taken care of so that as much funding as possible gets directly into the classroom for our students.
Thank you, Board President and Board Member Jackson. I think one of the first things is just looking, I would guess that on May 1st, there was a different dynamic from just the presenters at the table. So the first thing was really linking the academic side and the budget office together to build the budget. And the team has worked really hard, and you see that tonight that they're even sitting together. Not that they didn't like each other before, but that they're sitting together because we really wanted to make sure that the budget shows the priorities and our values. And so the teams have come together to really work on that. And I think Dr. Gonzalez and Dr. Blea can really speak to what we've done in looking particularly at duplication.
Madam President, Member Jackson, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, appreciate the question. And that question, quite frankly, has driven a lot of the work and the discernment of the work throughout the year. I think there's several things that I like to point to at the macro level and then defer to Dr. Blakey for some, Dr. Blea, for some more specific examples. One is the district reorganization to align to the strategic plan. So with a specific example being the establishment of the federal and state programs office. this office was put into place to really look at return on investment, but a term that we like to use more so these days is return on learning. Is what we're doing really yielding a return on learning? And we have several examples where we have really looked at that critically. We've strove to reduce and eliminate duplication of efforts with the reorganization of our district, to really look at our federal funds in a district lens, not a departmental lens. In other words, we get our Title I money and we establish a Title I department. We get our Title II money and we establish a Title II department, Title III, Title IV, Medicaid, and so on. But really looking at our federal funds as a whole to achieve a district set of goals. And that is something that we could not have told you a year ago. That is the case now. Looking at these monies to really capitalize on a district initiative, a district strategic plan, and a district approach on how we are really moving the work forward. We're not shying away from program evaluation. In fact, there's a guest in our audience this evening that's helping us do this as we look strategically at program evaluation. What materials are we using? What programs are we evaluating? Are we being honest with ourselves on the return on learning? And if there are programs that we have been using that are not yielding success in terms of student outcomes, we need to be bold and we need to be able to say that we are going to strategically abandon some of those initiatives. That work has already yielded $2 million in project abandonment in terms of the work that we're doing along those lines. And there's other programs that we're looking at in terms of return on learning. There's another piece that I think is important to recognize, and that is we are no longer purchasing materials that are not high quality instructional materials, that they need to be able to fit that definition in terms of what we are doing. But it's not stopping there, because I think that, quite frankly, is just the first half step. It's really taking that change in adult behavior and supporting the magic in the classroom, which is high quality instruction, with support that our practitioners, our teachers, our educators are able to use those materials in a meaningful way in the classroom. So Member Jackson, I think the bold work, the hard work around strategic abandonment, project alignment of resources, the emphasis on return on learning, and the elimination of duplication of efforts is the work that defines our approach at this time. And I would like to ask Dr. Blea to give us maybe some more specific examples.
Good evening, Madam President, Member Jackson, Superintendent Blakey. Me just being here and the establishment of the office is what's different. So beyond that, looking at federal, state, city, county grants, there are many. And so we have, for example, we just received another state grant today that adds to the pot. And so instead of just saying, here's an additional amount of money, we want to say, great, here's some extra money, but what do we do with that? And how does it meld or weld, I should say, with our plan? One of the things I did initially is I asked a lot of questions. I'm a program person, I'm a former principal supervisor. So when Dr. Gonzalez said, you're going to do this now, I looked at it from the program side, because that's where I am familiar with doing this work. And I said, why are we spending X amount of money on this thing? What's the purpose? What's the data? I asked a lot of questions. So we brought in departments every quarter and asked them those questions. You asked for this amount of money, you received this amount of money. What are you doing with it? Are you doing professional development? Great, but what comes after that professional development? How do we know that that changed anything in the classroom or with our resource counselors or nurses, so on and so forth? Similar like we do in schools with 90-day plans, which is what I was familiar with. We're doing a similar process with departments where we're asking them to identify their primary outcome, what is going to change for students, and then what do you need on the resource side to get that to happen? And then we want you to provide the data. So that process is significantly different. And I can tell you that a lot of questions have been asked and people are doing a lot of self-reflection on what is it they're spending the dollars on. Another thing that we did is, with the exception of grant administration, all Title I allocation is going directly to schools. So we are no longer pulling anything from the top. Every penny is going to schools, and that is a significant change. The other thing, I don't want to get too into the weeds, but the other thing is really looking at strategic abandonment. So not only what are we doing, but what is the outcome we want to have? And even if it's not a duplication, if there isn't an outcome that we don't want, that is also on the table for strategic abandonment. So those are kind of three big examples of how we're doing things differently.
Okay. Thank
That's
you.
super exciting.
I know.
I'll add that commentary there.
Yeah,
Did you-
no, I'm
do you have a
sorry.
follow-up question?
I'm sorry. My daughter just texted me, so I got distracted for a second.
They're doing awesome work with the.
That's what, yes, I am thrilled that a year later you are able to give me answers to a very specific question. And I wrote down the $2 million in abandonment and the high quality instructional materials and the fact that all Title I money is now going directly to our students. And I think that's the biggest issue is it's the strategic abandonment, the look at inefficiencies is done in an effort to make sure that as much gets in front of our kids as possible to drive student outcomes, right? It's not just about placing money in front of them or placing materials in front of them. It's how are those materials being used so that we get the outcomes that we want. So I'm sure I will have a follow-up question as we discuss, but for right now, I really appreciate the work that you've put in over the year in answer to that question. Thank you.
So I'll just add in response and follow-up. I did have a follow-up question to one of the pre-submitted questions, which is not necessarily budget related, but it is more academic related. And so Dr. Gonzalez, I think you answered it. I do have a little bit further of a follow-up. So the question was question number 20 on high quality instructional materials. What percentage of instructional materials have been aligned? So we know now that we're no longer allowed to purchase non-aligned instructional materials, which is like, amazing. You don't want me to sing, but I would sing. Fantastic. Super cool. Great. Excellent. The rest of the question was, what are the projected academic outcomes and cost savings resulting from the discontinuation of non-aligned materials? So I know you cannot directly calculate projected academic outcomes based on discontinuing non-aligned materials. And so my question, and so you can answer it now or you can hold it to Guardrail 3 monitoring, but it really is around this question of discontinuing non-aligned materials. So we're no longer purchasing non-aligned materials. However, I do hear a lot from parents, community members, and school leaders about non-aligned materials still being present in our classrooms and still being used. And so Dr. Blakey, is that something you want to hold for Guardrail 3 monitoring, or is?
Yes, Board President Gonzalez, you will see that in Guardrail 3.
Okay.
And so, and that particularly is connected to the performance framework as well.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you for that. And so that was just a follow-up to the question here. Are there any other board questions on the budget?
I'd like a follow-up to
Member Dominguez.
Jackson's point. And yes, I love the strategy that has been implemented and the addition of Dr. Blea. However, I need to ask, and I just wrote this down. There is a distinction between high quality instructional material and high quality instruction that is informed by community. And this is critical in terms of our community school alignment. We have 60 schools, 61 community schools, and so I've been in conversation with people that are part of the collaborative, the partnership that we're part of. And what really came home for me, especially at the National School Board Association conference, was the importance of culturally relevant material. And I have to say, I am not impressed with Amplify's focus on excerpts. I'm an English teacher. You have to read, and this is something that I noticed in my final year of teaching in Texas, Johnson City, Texas. In preparation for the STAR test, I never got a chance to teach a full novel. They were always excerpts, and that really bothered me. Had I stayed longer, that would have been the first thing I would change. And so while I appreciate that we are focusing on high quality instructional materials, I want to equally focus on high quality instruction grounded in the needs of our culturally rich and vibrant communities. Because when we're focused so hard on literacy and numeracy and achievement, that is a deficit focus for so many of our kids. And this is the feedback I'm getting from parents and parents with kids who are, at a higher functioning level. So just assure me that where is the cultural relevance happening in the instruction and being funded? Because, yes.
Want to make sure we're staying on the budget. So if you can respond to the being funded part, and then we'll hold the content part for guardrail 3.
Okay.
I was ready to answer the first part.
Well,
we can.
You can blend them because I think they're blended.
So Madam President, Member Dominguez, Superintendent Blakey, one of the things that we're doing on the budget side is that there are 26 community school coordinators, community school impact coordinators that are funded out of grant funds. And so to answer your question about making sure that those community schools have a coordinator, because that is in state statute, that's part of the answer to your question. I think the other part, which I don't oversee, but I'll speak and then Dr. Gonzalez can correct me, is the bilingual multicultural educational funds that we're using through the Language and Cultural Equity Department. The professional development and the instruction that takes place there's quite a bit of resources that go into that department. So there's part of the answer to your question.
As long as, are we funding chapter books and novels?
Well, so I just want to interject here that we all have opinions about what should be funded, and we delegate the decisions on what should be funded, particularly in terms of literacy instruction, to the superintendent and her team. And so we need to make sure that we're keeping our questions at the board level on budget. And so Dr. Gonzalez, if you can respond specifically as it relates to what we're funding in terms of strategy, and acknowledge that Guardrail 3 does state that the superintendent will not allow curriculum that is not culturally and linguistically responsive. So it is a guardrail, and we'll monitor that particular point around if there's CLR instruction in the guardrail conversation, but we'll keep this to the budget and funding of culturally and linguistically responsive instruction.
Madam President, Member Dominguez, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, I can assure you that that is indeed a value that we share in terms of the funding that is going out. And I'll give you a few examples. The action taken just a moment ago by the board to approve the bilingual multicultural application on the part of Albuquerque Public Schools to the state. Within it embeds funds for culturally and linguistically relevant materials, as well as professional development, as well as community outreach, to be able to support school and teachers on the ground to be able to do the work that you're alluding to. I can also tell you that there's just a couple of weeks away, several examples that we have in terms of summer opportunities for our teachers to engage in the professional development of the use of these materials aimed at really the instruction within the classroom. So there are countless, I'm pleased to share, opportunities where budget's being used to be able to achieve that end.
So I know we're going to cover interims, Guardrail 3, later, but I just want to note that there's nothing in our guardrails to ensure or it's not specifically stated. So I felt compelled. But thank you for your answer. And thank you for the work behind all this.
Other questions from the board?
Yes, I have.
Member Tomorito.
For the past 2 days, I was attending the Special Education Law Conference put on by PED. And a question came up, and I'm sure you're aware of our modified program and the graduation requirements that will soon be exiting out. And I noticed, and the reason for that was the increase of CTE funding. I don't know if it's enough time to state whether you know what's going to happen, how is the funding going to take on this avenue of getting rid of the career graduation diploma or the modified. And during the workshop, and PD answered it was because of the increase of our CTE funding that was taken away. So I don't know what the plan is for APS to take that on, and how are we going to inform parents and families? Because I know, is it with this freshman class we're doing that? Yes. And what does that look like?
Board member, Tomorito, board president, board member Superintendent Blakey. One of our goals with CTE is definitely in braiding of funds. So we've been looking at our funds for operational, for consumable supplies. We've been looking at our instructional materials funds, also our SB 9 capital funds, and of course our CTE state and federal funds. And by being able to braid all those, we feel like we are going to be able to support those programs. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Dr. Blaya to talk about some of the state and federal funds and the programs of study.
Madam President, Member Tomorito, Superintendent Blakey, the PD in March updated the programs of study for CTE, the course sequencing. So one of the things we're doing currently with the federal and state grants is making sure that all of our high schools have a program of study with the 3-course sequence. And remember that the programs of study align to high wage jobs as well as in-demand professions. So we're making sure that, and especially now with the course changes, that the courses that we're offering at each high school for that program of study align. So students finish with a completer course with the certification, with dual credit. We're making sure that we're setting them up in their course sequence starting next school year, that everything is tied up and that the funding aligns directly to those programs of study so those students do finish ready for the career.
Follow-up question. So do you expect the transition plans to look a little more different, or how do you, for course of study, or how are we going to implement that where parents can understand that this is the avenue and this is what we're pursuing for our students in career readiness?
But just as a point
I'm
of
sorry.
order, again, I
Sorry.
think this is not a budget question and is more of a programmatic question. So perhaps we can refer that one to after the meeting as well.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. Other budget questions?
I have one, Madam President.
Yes, thank you. Member Benavides.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here this evening and for providing such a wonderful, comprehensive report that I think is easy for everybody who's reading it to understand. And also thank you for answering our questions, because I know I submitted quite a few on this topic. And also thank you for establishing the federal and state program office. I think that's fantastic and it's very helpful. So my question is in reference to question 21, and I'll go ahead and read the response, and then my follow-up, just so that anybody watching can have some context. So contract duplication elimination. How many external contracts have been discontinued due to duplication of services? And what is the total anticipated savings or reallocation amount to be reported in the 25-26 adopted budget? And so the answer is 3 external contracts have been discontinued that add up to approximately $1.5 million. And so, that's great. We want to save money where we can. But for the people watching at home and for the constituents I speak to and almost everybody I come into contact with, APS has a $2 billion budget. And obviously, that's a very, very, very small percentage. And so can you provide some additional information? And if you can't now, that's okay. But so you discontinued 3 external contracts. Out of how many? And what is their collective total?
I don't think we have that information off the top of our head, but we could get that to you.
Okay, I didn't think
more
so, but-
specific.
Okay, thank you.
There's also Board President and Board Member Benavides. Those are the programmatic, contracts. And as Dr. Gonzalez said, we continue to look at it. I think the other important thing is that there's also been consolidation of departments. So there's money that has been also captured just in duplication of literal positions that were doing the same thing in multiple departments. And as Dr. Gonzalez mentioned, we had, a lot of these funds were running divisions outside other divisions, and so there wasn't a coordinated effort. So there's we had duplication of positions too. So there's money that's also captured through some of that.
Wonderful, thank you.
Great. Thank you. Before we circle back around, I'm sorry, Member Benavides, any follow-up to that?
No, thank you.
Great. Before we circle back around, I had my question, which is, what budgeting strategies are you using to ensure that the funds are targeted effectively to our Yazzie Martinez population students?
I can start with that, and then the team can also answer. So Board President and members of the board, one of the main things we have done is really looked at how everything we're doing is aligned to achieving the goals. And so a lot of the questions you have also could be seen as far as how do we know this is working? I think one of you had mentioned that earlier. It's through the monitoring of the goals, right? So because we're putting all of these things in place to make sure that we are setting structures up in order to meet the needs of the goals. So one of the big things that we did was in the performance framework, and that is particularly looking at how we are supporting schools that need more support in meeting the Yazzie Martinez ruling that we have. And so we're really looking at how are we looking at each of these individual programs, each of these individual positions, how are they aligned to our goal, and how are they aligned to schools that are having more difficulty in making changes there. So that's kind of like the broad level of how we've looked at it. And then within the budget at a more granular level, you'll see where there's like line items specifically. And I don't know if you all want to speak to that. Particularly like with special education, you'll see it with our community school coordinators, our transformational coaches in the equity department. You'll see where there's specific programs or initiatives that are being funded more strategically. Dr. Gonzalez, go ahead.
I was going to speak, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Blakey. I was going to lift up and elevate the performance framework. The superintendent's done that. But the only thing I would add to a response to your question is that schools are accountable to the alignment of their budget to the goals and to the 90-day plan. And that is not a one-time thing as it previously was. So for example, schools were often working on the budget during budget season. Well, the budget, we know, is a living, breathing resource, and alignment is ongoing, and it's not isolated to one time in the year. So for example, schools and principals next month in May at their principal meeting will be doing an exercise, a further deep dive into their budget in alignment to their 90-day plan. And that may mean that they adjust some of their expenditures. That may mean they realign things, but that is a direct example of how we are continuing to have the 90-day plan, the continuous improvement mechanism, and the resource, the budget, in alignment on an ongoing basis so that it isn't isolated to a single point in time, and that we just wait until a year from now to see if it worked or not, in specific support of the goals which are built around our Yazzie Martinez students.
And I think coupled with that, Dr. Gonzalez has been working with the assistant superintendents on a principal scorecard. So the principals, all with their supervisors, are able to look at and expected to look at their data in a disaggregated fashion regularly. I even know from going to school visits, the principals often pull out their scorecard to show what the data is showing of where they are doing well and where they're struggling with populations of students. Likewise, then the principal scorecard allows the assistant superintendent to work with the principal on how is your budget. Just as a district at this macro level, we're looking at it. The assistant superintendents are able to work with the principals as at a micro level of how are you aligning your budget to where the data on your scorecard is showing that you need to make advances.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's really awesome. And I think underscores some of the earlier points that you shared in response to Member Jackson's question around forging more coherence by connecting 90-day plans to principal not evaluations, principal scorecards to the budget, to the goals and the guardrails, which is great. I do have a follow-up, which is related specifically to one of the points that you made, Dr. Blakey, around how we could see these more targeted efforts for Yazzie Martinez students show up in the different budget areas. So you mentioned special education budget. And there was also a question in the pre-questions, question number 9, related to special education. So the question was essentially what measurable improvements in student outcomes or service delivery are expected as a result of increased funding for special education. And I want to take that information or that question and pair it with what was shared in the Indian Policy and Procedures meeting, the IPP meeting that was this week. So in that, APS staff presented data on Native American students, as is common. And one of the things that was shared is when it comes to Native American enrollment in APS, that included that 34% of Native students receive special education services. So 34% of Native students. The average is around 15% of students identified for special education. So there's more Native students are being identified for special education. So that's just the second thing I want to let sit. The third thing, the other piece of data that was shared in the IPP is only 2% of Native students participate in gifted. So this is far below the average for gifted participation for Native students as well. So if Yazzie Martinez targets Native students specifically, we are increasing funding for students with disabilities, and Native students are potentially still over-identified for special education and under-identified for gifted. How do we make all of that make sense? What strategies are being used to address identification strategies, specifically when it comes to how will this budget relate to strategies to improve teacher training on identification for Native students in special education and potentially for gifted?
I was looking at Ms. Campos to see if she wanted to come and answer the question. I know Ms. Reiser's on too, but I think that this question, Ms. Campos has a lot of background knowledge on what we're putting into place.
Which I appreciate, and you're more than welcome to come up. I do want to make sure that we are, per my reminders to everyone else, staying to the budget parts of the conversation. So if there are budget changes that Ms. Campos can speak to as it relates to over-identification of Native students in special education, welcome, Ms. Campos. Dr. Mrs. Thank you.
Thank you. Board President, members of the board, Dr. Blakey. So to be a little brief on this, and actually that is time. So as of January, Indian education, as well as language and cultural equity, of course, as well as our equity office and our equal opportunity services, came under kind of the equity umbrella. So this is one of the things, like Dr. Blakey was mentioning, is how are we changing our dynamic and looking at our departments that we're not being siloed. So one of the things in general, and this is a budget piece, is so each of these departments have their own budget. But now that they're under equity, we're able to look at all of these budgets and how are we able to leverage those budgets as a whole. So equity, Indian education, LCE, we are doing very similar work. So we're also looking at staffing, we're looking at budgets, we're looking at programming. And so things that for example, some of these statistics that we know are not good statistics for our Native American students, as well as our African American students and other students, where can we move and utilize different funding sources or different staff that we can utilize these things in a much better place. I'm also working with Dr. Blea on all of our federal funding for all of these departments. And again, how are we leveraging these things? So next year we are looking at, and this is part of what Dr. Blea is doing as well with our federal funding, how are we using our federal funding better to be able to look at, again, how can we go and be able to address a lot of these things much more strategically and directly on there. So that is part of our idea for school year 25-26.
And I think additionally, it's hard because I was trying to answer it as a budget question, and not everything needs money attached to it. So some of the statistics that you brought up about Native Americans, it's not necessarily a budget question, but a lot of work that Ms. Jett and Ms. Olguin are doing on MLSS and SAT is connected to how we are working on the over-identification of students, but it's not necessarily a budget question. So that's why it was kind of hard to answer it specific to the budget, because not everything we need to do differently involves money.
Yeah, which I appreciate. And so that's why I tied it to the question 9 in particular. So if there's an increase in funding for special education, and then there's also challenges that we're aware of, particularly as it relates to Native students in special education, how does that jibe? So I appreciate the response, particularly related to braiding and leveraging those funds across those different divisions and what this could look like going forward. Dr. Gonzalez, you wanted to add?
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Blakey, a specific monetary or budget implication related to targeted support for the new eligibilities around gifted education, for example, leadership. As an example, there are different ways now students are potentially able to qualify for gifted education. So as we look at this for all students, but specifically to your point, our Native American students, there are several examples, as we've seen over the last several weeks, just within the last several weeks, in regards to our bilingual SEAL season. There are potentially several examples there where students would qualify for gifted education based on some of the new eligibilities afforded to all students under gifted ed in New Mexico.
Yeah, which is awesome. I know Member Tomorito has a follow-up. I just want to real quick close that line of question from me with, so Ms. Campos, you mentioned how multicultural education, Indian education, and, well, actually the microphone's going to go to Ms. Blay, but Dr. Blay are all under you. And then special education is not, though, right? That's separate. And so that seems that something that Dr. Blay would be working on to ensure that the IDEA and special education funds are also coordinated with Ms. Campos's shop. So can you just speak to that? Like what that looks like and how you're making sure that those special education funds are targeted to our Yazzie Martinez students?
Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Blakey, at this time, I do not oversee IDEA funds. I will say that APS is participating in the unified application, meaning that for Titles 1, 2, 3, 4, and IDEA, we all submitted one application. So there is more coherence than there's ever been, but it's not quite as coherent as you're making it out.
Okay, but we'll get more coherent,
Well, special education is under the chief academic officer because we feel like it's very needed to be aligned to the goals as students are, in goal 1 with special education services. And in the past, when we had special education as a department on the side, it implied that special education is a place that students go, not a service.
Yeah, so in terms of the organization, regardless of where it sits, just wanting to make sure that the funding streams are coordinated. And what I'm hearing from Ms. Campos is that's a priority and something they're working on. So that's awesome. And then Member Tomorito, you had a follow-up.
Yes, and I'm only saying this because of my own son and the ability to he's twice exceptional. So I wanted to know, when we do see these high numbers within Native American students, have we also looked at the testing for some of these children to be twice exceptional to tie in both the gifted and the special ed area?
So Board Member Tomarito, members of the board, Dr. Blakey. So these are one of the things, again, we are going to be analyzing and looking at. One thing I do also want to mention, and that is very similar to President Gonzalez, what you were saying. So myself as the Chief of Equity, and then Ms. Jett as the Chief of Academics, we are working now hand in hand. We're meeting weekly. And so that's part of the de-siloing, is then how are we, as from the academic side, as well as then from our equity and other pieces, how are we collaborating and talking about these things in a day-to-day manner? So again, we're not connecting those. Another piece of that, for our statistics from Native Americans to African Americans, is also part of our Equal Opportunity Services Department is under equity. So we are also monitoring many of those things, particularly, again, special ed. Disability is part of civil rights. So we are looking at those statistics that way and looking at, again, what are those disproportionate numbers? And through that office as well, how are we identifying, and we can look. And then I know this is a budget discussion, but as Dr. Blakey was mentioning, these go hand in hand. And we're then also looking at the cultural pieces of that. Again, many times, my son's kind of the same thing. He qualified for services, but he also had some exceptional pieces. But as a Native student, from a cultural perspective, are we acknowledging those things or understanding those things? So again, going back to be looking at how are we potentially looking at cultural relevancy, professional development, making sure we're not looking at biases that we're over-identifying or under-identifying, and how can we support our schools with that?
Thank you. So we will move now to additional board member questions. Thank you, Ms. Campos. Are there other questions? Member Jackson maybe appears to possibly have a question.
Madam President. So my question is in relation to the state equalization guarantee. It is on page 11 of our packet, but it kind of dives down a little bit further. So the legislature just voted to increase the unit value in the SEG for the secondary factor, which means that we will get more money for students in grades 6 through 12. So my question is, where is that funding going? And second to that, will schools have the ability, like will it be site funded? And will schools have the ability to kind of make the decisions on where that funding goes at a school level?
Thank you. So Board Member Jackson, Board President, members of the board, Superintendent Blakey, I wanted to bring your attention to slide 7. So if you look at slide 7, it's titled Budget Positives. That first little green block to the left, you can see right here, when the bill was first introduced, it had 6th grade separate from 7 through 12. So just wanted to bring to your attention that this is combined now that the governor has signed it, and it is 6 through 12 with a factor of 1.30. And again, yes, going back to slide 11, that is going to change because, as you can see, we put subject to change because of these documents put together before the governor signed it. So you will see a change in this, and you will see final numbers in May. As far as these factors, they are above the line. So those factors are part of the funds that are flexible. So you can see in slide, if you go to slide, 10, where we talk about what is new, what is continued, what is increasing, and what is different. In the new ones is the academies of Albuquerque, and then you can see the middle school interdisciplinary teaming, and also opening of 9th grade, adding 6th grade, adding 8th grade, adding another 8th grade to Janet Khan, and aligning the CTE programs a lot of that secondary funding will be used for those specific programs. And I don't know if Dr. Gonzalez or Dr. Bland want to add anything else.
I think that, so the money that, from the secondary factor, it all goes into the big pot. So the above the line is all, so it's not specific that means that each school that is in the secondary factor will get this amount. It goes into the big pot that then gets distributed to all the schools.
Okay, so as a follow-up then, I guess, what is the benefit of putting it into a big pot for the entire district instead of distributing it to the individual schools to allow them to determine the site level funding?
Board President and Member Jackson, members of the board, we always prefer to have money above the line that isn't as restricted, because when you put it below the line and there's more restrictions on the schools, then you can't do as much with everyone else. So meaning that when we're able to fund some of these middle school initiatives or put it into the pot to be able to expand the K-8 schools, it gives more flexibility as a district holistically, because we don't, the staffing formula that we use in order to staff middle school, high school, and elementary have always had to kind of borrow money from, it's always in the big pot. So if it were to be piecemealed as far as elementary can only use from below the line and for this amount, and middle school can only use this, high school can only use this, it's probably making the budget team go crazy, because that would mean we can't fund anything, because we wouldn't have enough to move around to be able to have the flexibility that we're able to kind of put funds into a big pot that allows us to be more flexible with our funds, that then allows the schools as an instructional council to be more flexible with what they have. But we don't have the amount of money that we have always been basically carrying for a thing, for a term. We've been carrying the middle school in the funding from being able to pull money from the elementary or the high school because of the way that we're funded. So anything below the line restricts us to be able to fund schools at scale.
Okay. I'm gonna have to ponder that.
While you are pondering, Member Jackson, are there other board questions on the budget presentation?
Yes.
Member Dominguez.
And I'm torn because I have a follow-up to Board Member Jackson's, but I also have a CTE related question. And I think it's a follow-up to number 10, question number 10. And I'm just going to repeat the question for the sake of the public who's viewing. What specific increases in student enrollment, credential attainment, or work-based learning participation are anticipated with the enhanced support for career and technical education? And what is the timeline for reporting these outcomes? In the answer, you listed percentage increases. But first, I'd like to know, what are the raw numbers behind those percentage increases? And how will your strategy, the answer that you provided, how will these address our most disengaged population, and in particular, our ELL students, who are, I think, more vulnerable than ever? So it says here, CTE enrollment, a goal of a 10% increase in CTE concentrator enrollment by the end of school year 26, but 10% of what? Like raw numbers, what do they look like? And how are we funding?
So I think again, making sure we're focused on the budget part of the question. So how are we funding the increase in enrollment on CTE that we're projecting to have?
Well, yes, but I think we need to know numbers in terms, for the purpose of knowing, are we growing programs? I mean, what are we funding?
So, Madam President, Member Dominguez, Superintendent Blakey, I don't have numbers for you, but I can answer part of the question. In order to be aligned with Perkins funding, we at APS, for every program of study that we're funding, have to offer a 3-course sequence. We have to do that. We're not doing a great job of that right now. Moving into next year, the funding is completely 100% aligned to programs of study that have the 3-course sequence. In addition, Perkins law states that we have to emphasize special populations, so students that are furthest from justice, if you will. And so by having the 3 courses, by funding the 3-course sequence, we are providing opportunity for students to attain certifications, increase in certifications, increase in work-based learning opportunities, and increase in completion of AP or dual credit courses. So that's the second part, and then I think we can work on getting you the answer to the first part.
Okay.
Thank you. Dr. Blay, did you have a follow-up?
Well, I do have a follow-up that's related to funding and Board Member Jackson's question about above the line and the big pot concept. So we know that the governor signed the law saying that we are required to give everybody, all staff, a 4% increase versus an average of 4%. So how is this going to impact your plans, and what's the plan for?
Board President and Member Dominguez, and I can have Ms. Apodaca speak more specifically to it. But that is kind of what the question is with above the line versus below the line and a secondary factor. You have to remember that more than the majority of our funding, I was going to say more than the majority, but that's not real. That's like saying the same thing. The majority of our funding goes to personnel. A middle school teacher and an elementary school teacher and a high school teacher all make the same salary. We don't distinguish that if you teach middle school, you get paid different than if you teach elementary school. So because of that, that's why that secondary factor and it being above the line is really important, because if more than, if 90% of your budget goes to personnel and you have to pay all of the teachers the 4% and all employees of 4%, then we need the bucket to be as broad as possible to be able to, because that bucket is used for employees. So that secondary factor going up is what helps us to be able to fund the 4% raise for all employees. Ms. Apodaca, do you want to speak more specifically to how that is?
Yes, thank you. Board Member Dominguez, Board President, Board Member Superintendent Blakey, if you look at slide 12, so slide 12 is our operational fund budget summary. You can see we have the resources and then the expenditures. So when we create our budget call that goes out to the schools and goes out to the departments, we anticipate that 4%. So we put it in ahead of time. So as you see these expenditures for schools and departments, we have put that 4% into there as we're building our budget.
So you were anticipating a required across the board 4%.
Yes, as we were listening to the committee meetings and listening to the LFSC, ELSC, then we went ahead and put that in initially.
Okay. High five.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other budget questions? Yep. Member Tomorito.
Looking at page 9 under academic strategy plan, And with behaviors being an issue district-wide K through 12, just wanted to know more about the behavior redirectors. Is that district-wide? What does that number look like that we're going to be using funding for?
Madam President, Member Tomarito, Superintendent Blakey, this is part of the response that all schools receive federal funds. So to your question specifically, behavior redirectors, this is at all elementary schools. Right now, there's an enrollment requirement for elementary schools to receive above a part-time behavior redirector. And moving into next year, all elementary schools, regardless of enrollment, will receive a 1.0 behavior redirector. That has shown to be successful in elementary schools at curbing student behavior.
And I want to point out, Dr. Blee is being humble about that decision, but I vividly remember that it was at one of the budget town halls that you all hosted when we heard from our constituents that they really wanted more support for behavior redirectors and behavior. And she was there thinking like, wait, I think we can make this work. So from that, taking the input from the public, sometimes we don't see what happens in those meetings, but that was a very tangible, her being there and hearing that, thinking, I can go back and figure out how we can make that work. If we didn't have that office established, it would have been in a silo where the person might not have even heard that that was a need or how to leverage the funds. But the response for behavior redirectors, specifically one for every elementary school, is from listening to the community and being flexible with the funds that we get and being responsive. Will it fix everything? Certainly not. Will it fix some things and help start to put some systems in place where it's not based on enrollment? Yeah, it will be very helpful to our elementary schools.
Well, that's really exciting to hear. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you, Dr. Blea, for the work. And maybe perhaps Noah can include that in the journal about how good we are at listening to our community and responding to directly meet their needs by making sure there's a behavior redirector in every elementary school. Maybe.
I have my Albuquerque journal sitting right here.
She does. Are there other questions related to the budget?
Yes.
Okay, Member Dominguez.
And I'm just if somebody else has questions, please, because I've got
the only one.
A slew. But, so this is a follow-up to questions 1 and 2. It's actually more 2. How much money is considered discretionary well, let me just ask the question. Well, how much money is discretionary? I didn't get that dollar amount. And I'd like to know how much of money is considered discretionary, how much was considered discretionary for 24, 25, and how much is your prediction for 25, 26?
Discretionary to the full budget?
I think the question was about below the line.
I think
yes.
It's Abaddon.
Below.
Or above the line?
Below.
What percent of the budget is below the line?
Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to get that information for you because you were asking discretionary.
Yes, and yes, how much, like raw numbers, and then what percentage of the budget is that? And I think you listed how those funds are primarily allocated, what programs were funded.
Yes, I listed above the line. So I put the estimated SEG above the line is the 985 million, but you're asking below.
Yeah, the first question that I submitted was below the line.
Right. And the second one was the discretionary, which is above the line. That's the more flexible.
Well, I think, yes, we
I'm
talked
sorry.
about that.
Yeah.
But
so above the line, we have 85 million.
Right.
And then below the line, do you have that? Okay, one moment.
And this is just for clarification, and I think they will
We'll have to
wave
get
at
that.
me if I'm wrong. Some of the below the line money doesn't all come to the district. So it's not like we get here's the above the line and here's the below the line. Some of the monies below the line we have to apply for it flows through PED. So they're for specific initiatives that we have to apply for to get the money below the line. So it's not like when we get the funding from PED, that's why the SEG is so important, because that's above the line. Below the line funding isn't actually all just given to us. Many of them are specific initiatives below the line that the district has to apply for to be able to receive those funds.
And I think, so it's correct to say structured literacy, early literacy, community schools implementation is, there was a whole listing. But yes.
If I may assist, and I will make sure to provide you the percentage of grants versus operational funding after the meeting. Below the line is considered grant funding, and grant funding is not discretionary. Grant funding comes with very specific rules. It's considered categorical. It comes only for a pre-approved specific purpose, and it is use it or it will be repurposed or pulled back to the grantor. So it is not discretionary.
Okay, so it is, what's the term you used? It is categorical.
Yes, ma'am.
They're essentially state grants
Mhm.
that you apply
For initiatives. And so, yes, what was that amount in 24, 25? And then what is the predicted amount that you'll apply for below the line funding?
If you give me just a minute, I will be able to provide you the number for 26. 25 will take me a little bit longer. I have to run a report.
Okay. Okay.
And we can get that to you all at a glance.
Great. So we can include that in the at a glance. Member Dominguez, did you have additional questions?
I do. So what programs that are funded by these categorical monies, if any, are at greatest risk of being cut, if any? I know that we were doing, and I asked the question because we were doing reviews of what was working, what was not, what were we going to jettison, et cetera. So.
Are you talking about below the line funding?
Yes, the categorical.
So, Madam President, Member Dominguez, Superintendent Blakey, you're referring to the state categorical funds, correct? So
yes,
right now, we have not received any written confirmation that there's any funds of being in danger of not being renewed or allocated as long as we follow the grant application guidelines. So as far as state funding is concerned, as long as we apply and meet the requirements, we have not received any communication that we wouldn't be funded.
Great.
And so I think when you were asking in danger of being cut, you're suggesting in danger of being cut by this administration as part of the ROI work, or are you suggesting being cut by the state administration?
Well, yes, all of that. I mean, things are in, there's so much in flux right now. It's hard to, and so many buckets.
Sure, but I think
for clarification, the state below the line funding are all initiatives that were funded out of House Bill 2 just recently. So those aren't anything that was cut would have, and I don't know any of the top of my head, that were funded last year below the line that are not funded this year below the line. I haven't heard of anything that came our way that we were concerned about that wasn't So anything that is below the line for state funding has been signed by the governor and is in the budget for next year. So there isn't anything that's like iffy for any of the state funds that have been approved by the legislature and signed by the governor. Anything that would have been vetoed, the time has passed and things have been signed. So those funds are secure.
Okay. And it's hard to gather all this from the language, right? Because the answer was highly technical, and assumes that we know something so just a reminder that this goes out to the public and they don't know how to make sense of this, the answers. So just, it's helpful when we get these details for the constituents that we serve. Because yes, people do see that, in fact, I saw the Journal headline that we've gotten more money, even though there's less enrollment. But I would encourage you to do a historical deep dive and to our young journalists and guests. So another follow-up question. So I'm hearing some good news. One of my concerns was that schools with low enrollment, particularly elementary schools, they're not facing any kind of cuts in programs. I mean, I'm happy that they're all getting behavior redirectional list.
All elementary schools, regardless of size, will receive a behavior redirector. The schools, their budgets that they received prior to this, so they received their budgets in March, I believe. Those are based on enrollment. So it's hard to say if schools lose anything in personnel, it's because they lost students, and our schools are funded by how many students they have. So for example, if a school had an assistant principal this year, but then they lost enrollment and they went under the number of students that a school receives an assistant principal, then they would have lost an assistant principal. So that's why when we talk about, small schools being expensive, it's because we try to limit as much as that as we can. But if they do fall under the threshold of funding, then that's when you'll see schools that have half a librarian or half a nurse or half an assistant principal or no assistant principal. If any schools fall under that population, then they do lose those. But that's based strictly on schools size,
right?
Not on budget. It's not a budget cut because of funding. It's a budget cut because of students.
Okay.
Additional questions?
Yes. What services will be lost? And you just listed potential positions that get cut. So do you have a listing of those positions that have been cut due to lower enrollment?
Madam President, Member Dominguez, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, we do have a budget formula which has a student enrollment correlation to the FTE that is allocated for assistant principal, librarian, number of teachers, and so on down the line. We do have that.
Yes. So if a school lost students, then they might, this year they had 23 FTE in their budget. And then when they got their budget for next year, they have 21 FTE because they lost students. So the formula doesn't justify that they need the 2 additional teachers. And so the team works on all of those adjustments. And likewise, on the flip side, if schools are up in enrollment,
Right.
then those schools receive additional FTE.
And what I would say in addition to that, Member Dominguez, is the team is working really since now on a weekly basis to look at student registration, student enrollment, and to ensure that we are in compliance. That is an ongoing thing well into the fall because we have to be in compliance with state statute and our collective bargaining agreement to make sure that we are providing each school the number of teachers that they need to serve their student population. And that's ongoing.
Okay, because, and this is just feedback because I'm hearing, well, we lost 11 teachers or, and there's just some confusion, I think, is what I'm gathering about the why. And I think the other questions. So yes, I just wrote, the public needs more guidance with regard to this link that you provided on staffing, school budgeting. And I think you answered that question. And if there's anything that I need more information about, I'll just submit those questions.
Great. Thank you, Member Dominguez. Any additional questions on this agenda item? All right. Well, I'd like to thank the team for your very thorough presentation, for all of the presentations that have preceded this, and for all the information you've provided on the website as well. I do want to underscore appreciation for the changes that you've made to the budget process as a result of questions from the board, as a result of alignment to SOFG, as a result of feedback from the community. That's super awesome. And I hope the community hears that and recognizes that. I also just want to acknowledge your work too on spending down our federal ESSER funds to the penny. There has been a lot of coverage in the media around some crisis related to ESSER funds and how they're being spent down. And it's just really fantastic to be able to be in a place where we can say our district did what we were supposed to because we have professionals on the team who know what they're doing. So just want to express appreciation to the full finance team and to you, Dr. Blakey, for making sure that happens. To 27 cents. I don't know if there's like some competition for who did it best. I think we would win. The other thing I want to acknowledge is that in the process of going through student outcomes focused governance, of hiring a new superintendent, and of trying to realign our budget to the goals and the guardrails, we've had consistent conversations around how much time it would take, how difficult it would be, and conversations around some of the trade-off decisions that would have to be made. Dr. Blakey has previewed these trade-off decisions in a variety of different forms. Part of that has been related to the right sizing initiatives. Part of it has been related to the performance framework. And so important to acknowledge that when we are trying to be equitable, when we're trying to reach our goals and guardrails, there are trade-offs. And so funding is moved from one pot to another, one school to another, one group of students to another. And that is not great for those who are losing out, so to speak, of the funds. And I just want to express appreciation again to you, Dr. Blakey, for having previewed that, having previewed that we as board members could anticipate some feedback on that around how people feel to lose funds, particularly as it relates to the performance framework in Title I. And these are difficult decisions that need to be made, but appreciate the work that you're all doing. And then the last thing I'll say on the budget is this is our second to final presentation on the budget. We've had them in every meeting, and thank you for presenting to us the calendar for the budget adoption, which we've been sticking to, which is great as well. So our final budget presentation will be during the May 7th meeting when we will also approve the budget. We'll have those materials in advance. We are expected to review those materials in advance, to submit our questions in advance, and to review the answers in advance. That is our role as board members, to make sure that we are doing that and fulfilling our duty to make sure we're coming prepared to have strategic conversations around the budget and able to come into this conversation approving it. So that final presentation is not a presentation where we're asking technical questions in the weeds because we've had lots of opportunities across all of the different program areas to ask those questions previously. We've also shared sample budget questions from a couple of different sources from Edunomics. There was one other one, and the Council of Great City Schools, ERS, that are related specifically to the board role, which do underscore that our role is not to develop the budget. So our role is not to determine what the budget should include based on what we think our priorities are, even what we think the community's priorities are, because we delegate that authority to the district. Our role is to approve the budget and ensure that it's aligned to our goals and guardrails and that it's following all legal requirements. So making sure we're staying in our lane on the budget. But again, thank you to our presenters for that. And we will move on to the next agenda item under discussion items, which is agenda item 6.2. This is a presentation of the Board of Education Community Engagement Calendar. Right now, this is presentation and discussion so that board members can provide additional feedback to the committee on this calendar, on our community engagement. We will accept and make revisions to the community engagement calendar and turn that back around so we can vote to accept the community engagement calendar in the May 7th meeting. One of the things that our board has done is to make it clearer and easier for board members and the public, we've put our progress monitoring calendar and our community engagement calendar in one single document. So on May 7th, we will be approving the progress monitoring calendar as one vote and the community engagement calendar as another vote, but they're the same document. So just want to make sure that we're clear about those distinctions and the opportunity to provide feedback on the community engagement in particular, because we own that. And so in our materials that were shared in advance, we had an opportunity to ask questions. And so I'll go ahead and turn it over to our presenter, who is the chair of our ad hoc committee on community engagement, Member Jackson.
Thank you, Madam President. So we all have in front of us the proposed two-year monitoring calendar, and just as a little bit of background, the proposed two-year monitoring calendar was discussed in the community engagement ad hoc committee. And we collectively gave our input, and this is what you are seeing in front of you. It essentially is a document that is a little bit slightly adjusted, but it's based on what has worked as we have gone through the first two-year segment of the community engagement calendar. So one adjustment that I know that we're going to need to make right off the bat is that according to our implementation calendar, we do need to add into our community engagement calendar a community SOFG training in July. So that is something that we can have discussion about. In particular, I just wanted to take a few minutes to address some of the questions that were sent in regarding the calendar. I am going to sorry, I don't mean to be all Valley Girl there. I am going to address the answers based on my perception of how I would answer these questions. And then I am not a committee of one. I do have other committee members who participate. So I will answer them how I see it, and then I will open it up to my fellow committee member to address anything that she would like to address. And then we can open it up to the full board for discussion if that works for everyone. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so the first thing that I just really wanted to point out is that on February 28th, the Community Engagement Ad Hoc Committee did present a review both at the board training as well as, again, linked in the At a Glance, where I think some of these questions could have been answered. So I do want to direct board members back to that document if there are questions about the community engagement review. The first question that came in, and this is under the heading of regarding board member schedules and personal time. How will the new two-year calendar account for individual board members' professional, personal, and family obligations over such an extended period? My answer, the two-year calendar was designed specifically to support long-term planning for both board members and, more importantly, the community. A structured, predictable, and board-approved calendar has improved planning and participation by establishing a framework of broad expectations, for example, indicating that the State of the District will take place in August without locking in specific dates very far in advance. This approach allows for flexibility as exact dates are determined closer to each event to better accommodate individual schedules and maximize participation. The next question. Will there be built-in mechanisms or checkpoints allowing board members to reassess and adjust their participation commitments as personal schedules evolve over the 2 years? Board members regularly assess and adjust their participation based on evolving personal and professional schedules. This happens on an ongoing basis as we plan for board meetings, committee work, community engagement events, superintendent meetings, and more. While each board member determines their own level of participation, we should hold ourselves to high expectations as we are accountable to our constituents. Flexibility is built into our structure, but so is a shared commitment to serving our students, parents, teachers, staff, and community with consistency and dedication. Next question. Is there a plan to rotate or evenly distribute engagements to avoid overburdening certain members more than others? Each board member is responsible for managing their own level of participation. There is no formal distribution mechanism for events or engagements. Board members are welcome to attend any events they are available for and choose to participate in. All right, under the next theme, so to speak, regarding the division of work among members. First question, how will responsibilities for community engagement events be shared across board members to ensure equity in workload and visibility across districts? Community engagement events are consistently shared with the full board through multiple channels, including the At a Glance newsletter, announcements during board meetings, discussions at board and committee meetings, and direct emails from board services, oftentimes using all of these methods to ensure communication. Just as an example, regarding the regional town halls, Save the Date was first included in the February 21st At a Glance and repeated the following week. Specific dates and locations were provided in the March 7th At a Glance. A request for board member participation was shared in the March 14th At a Glance. The event's slide deck was also shared on March 14th with an invitation for suggestions and edits. Aside from the ad hoc committee members, only one additional board member provided input. RSVP updates were included in the March 21st At a Glance, along with a second reminder to confirm attendance with board services, and promotional materials, including social media graphics and an article, were also included to support the event's visibility. Ultimately, all board members are given equal opportunity to participate in engagement events, but participation remains a personal responsibility. Visibility and equity across districts are best achieved when all members actively respond and engage. Next question. Will members have the option to designate alternates or share duties for high-demand events when scheduling conflicts arise? Board members routinely share duties for community engagement events, which is why attendance requests are sent out well in advance. This allows board services and members to coordinate who will be present, ensure balanced participation, and identify event leads as needed. However, there is no formal process for designating alternates. Either a board member is able to attend or they are not. Each member is individually responsible for their own level of commitment and contribution. Next question. Has the ad hoc committee considered formal guidelines or expectations to support fair participation and avoid burnout? Formal guidelines and expectations are already outlined in our board guardrails. Specifically, Board Guardrail 1 states board members will not act on assumptions about each other's intentions and will accept responsibility for their own actions and behaviors. Each board member is responsible for managing their own level of commitment and contribution. Ultimately, we are accountable to the community we serve. As such, there is no current need to establish additional formal guidelines outside of what is already included in our governance manual. And the third theme, regarding calendar flexibility and responsiveness. First question, what level of flexibility is built into the calendar to accommodate unforeseen events, emergent issues in the community, or urgent matters requiring board representation? As noted previously, the calendar is set broadly over a 2-year period to support planning and transparency. Events are scheduled closer to their actual dates, specifically to allow for flexibility and to accommodate emergent issues or evolving community needs as effectively as possible. Next question, how frequently will the calendar be reviewed or updated to remain responsive to district and community needs? The calendar is aligned with the implementation and monitoring calendars and is established in broad terms for a 2-year period. However, it can be updated when warranted, as evidenced by the recent adjustments to the budget meeting schedule. Third question, last question. Are there contingency plans for rescheduling or reassigning events if a board member is unable to attend due to illness, emergencies, or other commitments? Community engagement events are designed for full board participation, but it is understood that individual board members may occasionally be unable to attend due to illness, work obligations, travel, or personal emergencies. These events are not rescheduled based on individual availability. They proceed as planned with the participation of the members who are able to be there. Ultimately, these events are designed for the community's benefit, participation, and engagement, and not for the convenience of board members. So those were the questions that came in. I will pause real quick and I will turn to my committee member and see if you have any additions or differences. Anything to say?
Thank you, Chair and Vice President Jackson. I don't have anything to add because I think you did an incredible job of answering those questions, which I think are very good questions. And I think that they are questions that while we might not have asked ourselves, I know the community is curious about, and I know that board members are curious about how these events that we attend, that we love attending, can coincide with scheduling conflicts and things that come up. And, you know, these things have come up in board participation in general. So I think that it's good to know that there are contingency plans for when we can't be there, that the duties are shared across board members, that there is visibility that's equal amongst board members, and that we ultimately have a personal responsibility to meet these demands, and we are accountable to our constituents, and we need to make sure that we can be available. And honestly, in my opinion, we should enjoy doing this. So great job answering the questions, and that is all I have to contribute. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, Madam President, that is kind of the long opener to the discussion on the 2-year monitoring calendar, and we are open for discussion.
Great. Thank you to Chair Jackson and Committee Member Benavides, Vice Chair. I'm not sure. You're the Vice Chair now. There you go.
There you go. You just got
You're welcome. You thought you could get out of doing more work. Are there any additional questions and feedback on the community engagement calendar? And as a reminder, this is our board calendar. So we own this. So we are determining, we are the ones who could make the decisions, obviously within limits. But other questions related to the calendar or suggestions, feedback that could be integrated before we approve it in a couple of weeks.
I have a question.
Member Dominguez.
Where can we find the questions and the answers that you just read?
Right, the question.
They were emailed by Christy.
So the questions were emailed, and the answers are in my personal Google Drive right now. So I will share those with Dr. Albright for distribution.
Great, thank you.
I'll do it right now.
Great. So I just want to acknowledge that we made this discussion and not action so that we could have opportunity to provide feedback prior to May 7th. And so in line with that, I guess have a question and maybe feedback. I see that we are keeping the board district open houses. And one of the things in your committee analysis of what worked and what lessons were learned from previous community engagement, there were a lot of lessons learned about the board district open houses. And one of the takeaways for me was staff time. These in particular took a lot of staff time because staff were helping to identify schools ×7. So schools in each district, time coordinating with the principals, coordinating with the activities directors or the staff. So a lot more staff time because it was 7 events in a course of a couple of months. And there were other takeaways and lessons learned also. But I guess I kind of anticipated that maybe we would accept that as like it didn't work because it just took too much time and wasn't maybe worth the return, but it's still on here as proposed, something that we want to do. So I'm curious for the committee's take on why you decided to keep that, and then also just board conversation on, is there something different we could or should try?
Okay, so so the board district open houses were, they remained on there because there was a feeling amongst the committee that it gave the opportunity for maybe more direct engagement with our district, with our board district level constituents. Now, that being said, there also was robust conversation within the committee about what if we move forward with these, what needs to be tweaked about that. Not the very least that there needs to be maybe some guardrails around what will actually be discussed when we go out for these town halls, and even specifically like a slide deck that like a skeleton slide deck that is shared with all board members to really focus in on what it is that what the intention is of going out to the I want to say tighter, but like smaller groups. So if this is something that we decide to do, I think that we need to come to consensus as to what those discussions are. I will take ownership and say I thought it was clear that the discussion was board role versus superintendent role, that we were going to our constituents to start the initial training on SOFG, and I don't think that I portrayed that message as accurately or as robustly as I could have, because we had a variety of conversations that happened. So if we move forward with the town halls, I mean, I'll speak personally. I loved it. I loved being able to have conversations directly with my constituents, but we absolutely need to make sure that the discussions are more targeted.
Yeah, so I think there was agreement on the discussion. My concern is staff time. That was one of the biggest concerns that surfaced if staff is helping to plan 7 events. Essentially
I just want to clarify too that
Member Tomorito, you have the
I'm
floor.
sorry. I didn't have any staff except for the end at my meeting. Other than that, I didn't involve any of them. I did own flyers. I did all of that on my own, and help with community did it, literally. And that's one reason why I'm disagreeing with the staff time, because there's some of us who didn't even require that. I didn't use staff time until they came at the end for sign up. That was it. But the other thing that was really lacking was the true one, how are we going to run this? How are we going to make these meetings happen? I didn't even know there was a food budget.
Well, so that's the point. So your questions around what you did not know were what staff provided. And so if we're providing food, if we're doing signups, if we're doing district social media, if we're doing coordination on the location, if it's not tied to a pre-existing event and we're doing something separate, that's all staff time. And so we can get into the weeds around, again, like each individual event, but my concern that I'm surfacing for the committee and for us is the staff time of ordering food, doing sign-in, doing all of that times 7. And so I think just also the total number of community engagement and outreach events, I just also want to maybe provoke a conversation on quantity versus quality. So did we achieve more quality engagement by adding 7 events or not? I loved mine too, got amazing feedback, thought it was great. But looking across the 7 and the number of people that we reached, I'm not sure that adding 7 events led to increased community engagement. So that's the conversation I want us to have, is what does quality engagement look like, considering that we are investing staff time in it? So that's a question for the board, not necessarily for the committee, because I'm totally fine with keeping the regional, not regional, district town. I guess I'm not fine. I'll just say that. I'm not fine because of the staff time.
And I agree.
Member Dominguez.
I agree with your concern. But as during a conversation that I had, and I think it was illuminating, it was a great conversation, and it was around this notion of staff time. Chief of Staff Johanna King and I came to an understanding that there was concern about a second community engagement, and that was what I was using, the term, the town hall engagement. And we said, well, what if I told her I don't need staff at any of these, but she suggested, what if you call it an outreach? It's like, if that relieves staff, then I'm happy to change it to a staff, an outreach.
That is a conversation we can have about what we as individuals do to foster engagement within our communities.
Well,
I just want to respond to, there is a very distinct definition of what community engagement entails that was part of our training in February or January. And in particular, with moving from the SOFG stage 3 to stage 4, it lists exactly what we should be talking to our community about. So we've moved from stage 1 and 2, which was getting feedback on what the goals, stage 1, getting feedback on what the goals should be, stage 2, sharing the goals, into stage 3, sharing how we're doing on the goals, moving into stage 4, getting ready to reset the goals. So there is a clear framework that we have that we've strayed from. And so the training that we had was that we need to get back onto that framework. So if we're going to use the term community engagement and do board-approved community engagement events that are aligned to the definition of community engagement, that's where I'm just making sure that we align staffing. So all of us are entitled and able to still do events in our communities. We still have to be mindful about being in schools because there are separate rules and norms around how and when we're in schools. So I just want to draw that distinction between engagement, outreach, and then whatever else we do as individual members.
Okay, I guess I'm suggesting that we are 7 thinking, smart women. I think we can find a way to modify rules or procedures in such a way that I like the 7 different town halls. But I agree that that we don't necessarily need to depend on staff. Now, my question is, does a town hall mean that we're in the schools or are we outside the school? Because this time around, we were in the school.
So town hall is not a term that's used with SOFG. So the 2 terms that we have with what we're doing here is community engagement, which I'm looking for the document with the definitions as I'm typing, which is an event that the district hosts where we bring people in. Community outreach is events where we go out as 2 board members.
So we use town hall. Where did that come from?
I think member board.
Yes, member Jackson.
It was like a default term that was used. But I think probably because it is easy for the community to understand that we're having a town hall versus the community's understanding that we're having an engagement event. So it's just a default term that was used. It's not a.
Well,
But we did treat it as an
It was an engagement event, yes.
Okay, so
Question, where are listening sessions? They're
So that's
defined,
something that's, I think, part of what Member Dominguez is describing is something that we can do as board members
okay. 'cause
whenever we want.
AJ describes them in his book very well and what listening sessions are. So I'm just saying that. I'm just wondering where those if it's SOFG and you said there was 2 definitions, where are listening sessions?
So the two, when I say the 2 definitions, I mean the 2 things that we're approving on our calendar that we will agree to do as a board. So we can do listening sessions. Those aren't part of what the full board is doing as a community engagement. So we did share, and as I mentioned, the community engagement coaching guidance that, as I said, describes specifically what we're doing and what and how. So if we follow that, that's what I'm trying to get to as it relates to specifically the calendar that we're approving.
Madam President.
Yes, Member Jackson.
Thank you. Okay, so I think the thing that I will add regarding specifically the district open houses, town halls, the district level engagement events, I think that the quality of those can be improved if there are better parameters around parameters and expectations about what discussions what two-way communication and two-way discussions we will be having when we go to the district level. Now, whether those, occur in a school or they occur at a neighborhood association, or I think maybe that's the point, which was also part of the review of the community of the committee, is that we don't always have to go to a school. And in fact, we shouldn't always be going to schools. We should be broadening our community outreach. And maybe it's at the district level engagement events happen at your neighborhood association. And maybe that is a parameter that is placed. That way it falls to me as a board member to reach out to my neighborhood association and engage, continue in those engagements. So I think that these didn't go as expected because to my discredit, I didn't lay out the parameters as clearly as I should have.
Which is fine, and I appreciate your owning that and acknowledging that. And I still am concerned about staff time and district staff time, board services, but also school staff. So I won't beat that dead horse, but I will just say it 5 more times. I'm just kidding. So that was the main concern that I had. And then just in terms of like the number of community engagement events per year, I was trying to count up, and I think I ended up with 13 if we're doing 7 district plus the state of the district plus the budget town halls plus the regional town halls.
Are you like in the year? Are you going August to August?
Oh, I don't know what I was doing. I was probably going January to December. But I guess what I want to be clearer on is like, what's the number that we're doing and how do we make them relevant and meaningful? So whether we do 13 or 10 or 2 or 50, just making sure that they're meeting our community engagement goals and resetting on what those are. So you acknowledge that you'll be clearer on what are the goals. So my primary feedback is quality over quantity. And I will open it up to other questions or feedback for the committee to consider as they continue to amend and edit the calendar.
So when do we intend to vote on this?
May 7th. Did you have a follow-up?
So
Okay, Member Dominguez.
Thank you. So I think clarifying the vocabulary use would be helpful.
We did just do a whole training.
On town halls?
On community engagement.
Oh, okay, but we also have the term town halls. And so I'm just asking that, yes, we were clear
We can have.
I came in on community engagement and community outreach, and those were the two categories that were in my head. And then we've introduced some new concepts. And so I just think it's important to clarify that, what they are, what their
So the
purpose-
committee has indicated they can add a glossary.
Okay, so that also has to extend, that clarification is part of our responsibility to the community. Because if we're confused, then they most certainly will be. And I would also just put this out there that I think it's important to give an update on the difference between goals and guardrails and interim goals and guardrails. And there is a distinction. We own the goals and the guardrails, and the superintendent dictates the interims. And the interims are what we evaluate. That's our progress monitoring. So we're so immersed in this that I think we lose sight that our community is not immersed in this. And so we need to be careful about how deliberate we are about teaching these concepts.
Thank you. And so in line with that, stage 4 for community engagement includes exactly what you described. And so what I'm hearing is that the need to be more clear on purpose for the community and for board members in our communications materials, and perhaps the calendar. So we can potentially revise that. The SOFG community engagement phases or stages was shared in the training that we had. I'll also check that it's in our helpful links, so we all have access to that. Member Tomorito, were you leaning in for a question?
Yes, I know that, as I heard Board Member Jackson speak, she stated that there's topics that we want all board members, when we have these community engagement meetings, that there's some set, whether it's dialogue, language, and I know particular, there was certain goals that we could, goal 1, I think it was, there's certain areas, there's certain topics in some of these meetings, but my concern is, especially when you hear public comment and you hear the community, when are we going to address their issues? Because if we're going to have set dialogue and meetings, or a set dialogue and presentation, when are we going to address the issues that are coming from the community? I know we're trying to do SOFG. I know we have a guidance reference point, but I'm concerned if we want community to attend, when are we going to truly address their issues? If we're going to preset a topic, choose what we want to be said, how we're going to train on SOFG, when are we going to get to the topics of the community?
So
or
I will
concerns?
take a stab at that. Maybe I'll phone my friend Sendel, or maybe I'll turn over to Courtney. So the way that this was answered in our community engagement training is that we do community engagement around the board work. So that is the goal and guardrails. That does not mean that is the only community engagement that the district does. The district and the superintendent in particular, and also school leaders, do their own engagement. And so that's where they're dealing with these more school-based problem-solving issues, which are not board issues, so to speak, a lot of what we're hearing in public comment. And the training in, was it February or January? February. The rationale for February 28th, the rationale for sticking to the goals and guardrails is because that's how we communicate to the community what how we've heard their vision and values and how we're sticking to it. And we're not moving based on a whim or something else that's just coming up as a board. So that doesn't mean that we can't be responsive to issues that are raised by the community. It just means that the work that we're doing in line with our student outcomes focused governance as it relates to community engagement, that is focused on the board work, which is the goals and guardrails. So unless someone comes off camera, I'm going to assume I got that corrected.
And only to state another opinion is that, and that's why the community is seeing council, directing board, and that we're not addressing the issues of the community. So there's that representation that we have to try and erase if we're going to continue with with SOFG or the council.
Yeah. So Sendel did come off camera or on camera to be able to try to respond to that. And I would just acknowledge that public comment is one glimpse of what the public is feeling.
Yes.
And so there's a whole bunch of other things. And I think the superintendent could speak to that as well. But I will turn it over to Sendel.
Thanks, President Gonzalez. I think that's very accurate. The board's responsibility is really the board-led community engagement. And board-led community engagement focuses on listening to the community. It's a two-way communication around the community's vision and the community's values. So from what I understood in this discussion just now, that is certainly led by the community. It doesn't feel like it's prescriptive what the community is going to speak about. There may be issues that community members raise about how their worries are being addressed or how their wishes are being addressed. And as noted, that's really the purview of the superintendent and her team who are leading implementation of the work in the district. And in my experience, and certainly consistent with the governance model, those issues are most effectively addressed by those as close to the issues as possible, because they are the most informed and the most expert in addressing those issues, which certainly I'm just getting to know you all. You may have individual expertise there. That is not the responsibility you shoulder as members of a board. The responsibility you shoulder is to represent the vision and values of the community. Hopefully no one is expecting you to deal with every issue that arises in the district, whether it's facilities or an instructional or student.
Thank you. I think also it was an abrupt change there, so my full sentence isn't formed. We did establish an ad hoc committee for how we would work with and respond to community. And so part of that charge was to try to figure out that question of how we could be more responsive. And so I think if that's still a question that we have, that is something that we could still explore. And so if anyone has questions for how we can do that, definitely put them out there or email them to the chair of the ad hoc community engagement ad hoc committee. And we can integrate those. If for example, there's a certain issue that seems to be bubbling up and it's related to school lunches and how the chicken nuggets are always not thought out, for example. And that continues to bubble up and bubble up and bubble up. It may be that the board decides that there is something that should be done. And so we can have a conversation about that. But again, this is our work. So if there are suggestions of things that we can or should do differently, let's get those suggestions in so we can add them to the calendar. Are there other suggestions, questions, concerns about the progress monitoring calendar as proposed? I'm sorry, community engagement calendar as proposed. Thank you.
I do agree with you about the quality versus quantity piece, because I think right now that as you look at the numbers, there is a lot of work and there's also not, I know we're concerned with staff work, but I also know it's a lot of work for board. So I think we really need to figure that out.
All right. So for the May 7th board meeting, those materials are going to be shared with the board on April 24th. And so for our committee to have revisions to board services so that they can share them with us, that will be due, I sent you these previously, but I'm just trying to find, that'll be due on April 21st.
Okay. Madam President.
Yes.
So just to clarify, we have our meeting tomorrow. So yay,
Perfect. Okay.
that works out well. And I just want to make sure that I have captured some of the feedback that has come so that when we have our discussion tomorrow, and if I miss anything, let me know. The quality over quantity, that we need to look at a glossary or tightened up terminology. Make sure we have defined a clarification on the purpose. Also, though, a focus on moving from stage 3 to stage 4. And that if there are any specific topics that board members feel need to be discussed, to email the committee.
Topics or formats or
yeah.
ideas.
Topics, formats, ideas. Okay, did I miss anything?
And then I think also just to acknowledge that you prefaced your comments with the fact that we're adding a community engagement event in July.
Yes, I did.
And so just that contributes to the quantity. Okay, so thank you to the committee for your work on that, for your ongoing work and for your future work to present the revisions to this community engagement calendar prior to the May 7th meeting. So with that, we will move on to agenda item 8, which is the president's report. So we'll start with public forum. Although public forum is not an opportunity for dialogue, we do want each speaker to know that you are heard and that we're working with the administration on resolutions. Some of the issues that were addressed tonight were regarding health education, the budget, community engagement policy, the board representative contact. I think that's how we contact how the public contacts board members, town hall meetings, deaf and hard of hearing open house, student outcomes focused governance, outdoor learning, SOFG coaching, bullying and suspension protocols, and children's health and well-being. I also want to acknowledge that during our last meeting, our April 2nd meeting, there was some language used during public comment that I certainly found inappropriate and to be in violation of our guidelines for speaker etiquette. As the presiding officer, I could have intervened and I chose not to. And I just want to acknowledge that. The reason I chose not to is because I felt that's what they were seeking. And they wanted to cause more of a scene. And so I thought the judgment decision that I made in that moment was to not intervene and to just let them continue. But I do want to acknowledge that neither I nor APS nor I know my fellow board members condone that type of language and condone that type of language in public settings. And so just wanted to acknowledge that was not okay. But we allowed it to continue just for the sake of that moment that we were in. One other thing to share is we have an addition to our APS board family as of today. Yay! So baby Sanchez, born today, 6 pounds, 10 ounces to board member Astorga. So big congratulations to member Astorga for that. Sticking it out past the due date. That's always tough. Our upcoming meetings, we do have next week on Tuesday, April 22nd, there's an audit meeting at 5 p.m. On Wednesday, April 23rd, there's a finance meeting at 8 a.m. We do have our next board meeting on May 7th, and during that meeting, the final budget will be presented for approval, and this budget is due to the Public Education Department on May 19th. In addition, on that May 7th meeting, Board Member Benavides will facilitate our discussion, our progress monitoring on Goal 4, Skills, Habits, and Mindsets for Life. And that concludes the President's report. Our next Board of Education meeting, as I just said, will be on May 7th, 2025 at the Alice and Bruce King Educational Complex here at 6400 Uptown Boulevard and live streamed at aps.edu. We will move on to our next agenda item, which is consideration for the Board of Education to convene an executive session as authorized by the Public Meetings Act, Section 10-15-1H7, to discuss the legal matter Arnold Gachupin et al. Versus Albuquerque Public Schools et al., 24-276 JMC KK. Is there a motion and a second to convene into executive session? You can just say so moved.
I so moved.
I'll second. This is Josefina.
Thank you. We have a motion from Member Jackson and a second from Member Dominguez. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Dominguez,
Yes.
Courtney Jackson,
Yes.
Heather Benavides.
Yes.
Ronaldo Tom Morito.
Yes.
And Yo Gonzalez.
Yes. So that motion carries, and we will convene into executive session and reconvene to open session after that executive session. So at this time, I ask all those people who are not part of the executive session to please leave the meeting, both the online virtual Zoom meeting as well as the in-person physical meeting here. Please leave the meeting. That's the last thing it says.
Is that what it-
Period. Do we want to take a quick recess?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a short recess.